Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, December 3rd, 2018. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Marcy Wheeler, journalist, blogger, author, answering the question, is this Mueller's endgame time? Meanwhile, George Bush Sr.'s death not in vain, as it spurs a near 2-week extension in budget negotiations amongst the Republicans and Democrats. Very hard to sum up the achievement of one man's life, but that's pretty big.
CIA.
Michigan and Wisconsin Republicans plot ways of overturning their gubernatorial losses. And more info implicating MBS and Khashoggi's death. Meanwhile, riots continue in France and runoffs with big stakes happening this week. Tomorrow in Georgia, Thursday or Friday in Louisiana. Secretary of State seats are up. Meanwhile, Trump having trade talks and presumably cake with Xi Jinping. A major international climate conference starts in Poland. And will a Democratic House call for a Jeffrey Epstein investigation?
Maybe not.
Meanwhile, Beck is back. Never Trumper no more. The Blaze and CRTV to merge in making one powerhouse outlet.
Not with Samantha Bee in a call for civility and shared humanity?
It did that.
Really?
That merger did not take off.
For a second, I thought there was a new Beck album.
No, none of that. Sorry. Beck is now going to be Gavin McInnes's patron. And lastly, over half of Americans delay or altogether avoid health care because of money. Making America great again. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of news today. And we will try and get to some of it. I imagine by midweek we're going to hear even more news on the Mueller front. But we have almost a 48-hour lull in that information, as far as I can tell. Donald Trump is in Argentina. We will get to that at the what is it? The G20.
G20. That's right.
G20.
G20.
Why so many?
20.
It's the great 20.
There's a lot of 20. It's the
so
elite 20.
Many. So on a day when I guess the CIA is leaking, and I can't quite, this story just continues to confound me a little bit. I mean, one gets the sense that these leaks from the CIA, if they're coming from the CIA, and presumably they are in some fashion, that there is this much and so detailed of information. Maybe it's coming through the Turkish government, but it seems to be maybe through our intelligence services. The level of specificity in terms of the information that we have about MPS directing and getting reports from the killers that were sent to chop up Khashoggi, to kill this guy. It's pretty extraordinary. There does not seem to be much consternation in the Bush administration to these leaks, which is odd, right? I mean, this is around when you would start to hear...
In the Trump administration.
Yeah, the Trump administration. You would imagine the head of the CIA would be troubled by these leaks if this wasn't in some way a mechanism in which to convince Donald Trump to do something.
What?
So I don't know, but we'll see. Meanwhile, one of the subjects of those leaks, of course, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, he was at the G20, and I don't know how to describe this. I don't know that I've ever seen two world leaders ever shake hands like this. Never mind. I mean,
It's called
this is
being cool. It's called having a certain camaraderie.
There's a handshake between Barack Obama and Kevin Durant that looks a lot like this.
Yeah, I guess
those are world leaders. To me.
honestly.
What's up, killer?
Check this out. This is MBS and Vladimir Putin shaking hands like they just, I don't know.
Like they just both clipped a couple of journalists.
Right.
They want to congratulate each other. You don't need to search to explain this.
It's crazy. Like, what?
We love it.
Now, wait. I want to go back and
Dipset.
slow it down a little bit. I want to go down and slow it down a little bit because you can see Trump in the background. Trump is right there. Boom. Oh.
Oh, those guys are so cool.
They'd probably be giving me the same kind of respect.
Yeah, but the problem is I don't get to kill journalists in the same way. It's so unfair.
I'm taller than him. Oh, darn.
Guys, you think can we hang out later maybe?
Yeah.
Can I sit? Where am I sitting? Can I sit next to them later? Oh my God, they're so cool.
That's just bizarre. It really is a little bit bizarre, isn't it?
Is it?
No, but isn't it? I mean, isn't that just sort of like a bizarre, like
I don't know.
unbridled excitement at seeing each other?
I mean, I don't know. I think this.
They're just living in a world where they're
the
just
fascist
like,
international.
they're just living in a world where they can't even like contemplate that what they're doing is even remotely like over the top. They're just like, that's the way we roll. It's pretty crazy.
People have also been sharing this about MBS sort of being just walked past in like a sort of handshake line. Just nobody really wants to shake his hand.
Nobody wants that photo.
Well,
MBS is like, it's fine.
Literally
Whatever.
has blood on his hands.
He's
Never loved us.
You know, he's looking at them and he's going, worth it.
I'm not here to make friends.
Let's. Meanwhile, Trump is at the G20, and really doesn't seem to enjoy it. There's been all sorts of reports that world leaders are sort of mocking him behind his back. Apparently, he met with Putin sort of casually, and yet the next day, Russian media has come out with all sorts of stories about Trump being a goof and unclear where he is and completely lost, and and sort of a clumsy oaf, which I imagine would upset him. And so here is Donald Trump. And which one is this? Is this the this is the Peña Nieto or
well, he's signing with Peña Nieto and Trudeau, and then the Macri here too.
Yeah, Macri's the president of Argentina.
Okay. Well, which one is okay? Yeah, there's just the
my pick is the Trudeau.
Yeah, that's number 6.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's look at this. This is they're signing the renamed NAFTA with slight changes, mostly just NAFTA again, with Trudeau and Peña Nieto.
And Krista Freeland. That's super funny.
Oh,
Former
right,
MR guest Krista Freeland.
Yeah, she's
Trudeau.
behind Justin Trudeau. Here, this is one of Matt's picks because he likes how awkward things get.
Trump, you can get a sense of what he would be like in a sort of a high school exam.
Pure social poison.
Who's going first?
Let's go. They're ready. Let's go. Let's go.
And then I like Trudeau here because he's the most professional. Looks up to get the photo shot, and the rest of the guys don't.
Well, it takes Trump like 10 minutes to sign his name.
I like how Opinion Nieto's looking at him like, wow.
I'm doing this version in a way they can't trace me.
Because if you mix up your signature, they can't trace it for bank fraud.
All right, now here is Trump, and he's meeting, who's this?
The president of Argentina.
The president of
Macri.
Argentina. And at the G20, they're hosting this G20. Trump obviously feels uncomfortable because he's around other human beings, particularly ones who do not, no longer, it appears, kiss his ass. They've all basically realized, like, it doesn't matter anyways. He can't deliver even when you're buttering him up. And so here is Trump, and unfortunately for him, with a hot mic, which reveals, which we all know, what he was thinking. Went the wrong way. Get me out of here.
He's having an anxiety attack.
Get me out of here.
Macri,
I got too many steps.
Macri's
So
like,
alpha.
I was like, Macri's like, what's the problem? Like, I'm
Like, this
part of
guy's
the new
nuts.
fascist axis in Latin America, selling off my country's assets to your campaign contributors. What are you?
And you get a little bit afraid by some stares.
Yeah, dude, you're in Buenos Aires, a very nice city, home of tango. Like, just walk up a step or two. It's okay.
He's like a horse.
If you're a fascist and can't be comfortable in Argentina,
Right.
Folks,
But if
big
they track me down here.
big corporations are getting rich from selling your data, and Congress has completely failed to save net neutrality to protect your privacy online. Now, internet providers and mobile carriers like Comcast and Verizon are free to restrict websites, spy on your online activity, or sell your browsing history to advertisers. But with one click, ExpressVPN shields your online activity from internet and mobile providers. ExpressVPN has easy-to-use apps that run seamlessly in the background of your computer, phone, and tablet. ExpressVPN secures and anonymizes your internet browsing by encrypting your data and hiding your public IP address. Get ExpressVPN protection for less than $7 a month. ExpressVPN is rated the #1 VPN service by TechRadar. Comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. If you ever use public Wi-Fi and want to keep hackers and spies from seeing your data, ExpressVPN is the solution. Folks, this is the way that, when I'm running a sock puppet campaign, I would use ExpressVPN, but also, which is, I of course don't do that, but there are sites that will not let you access them because of regions, right? To watch things, buy things, et cetera, et cetera. ExpressVPN helps you out with that. Plus, it just keeps your stuff safe. And you never know. It's completely random. People break into your Wi-Fi. They get on your public network, on an airplane, wherever it is. They can get in and steal a ton of your data, not to mention the daily barrage. You don't want to be chased around the internet because you once looked at something on Amazon, like you contemplated buying like a sweater for somebody, and then all of a sudden all sweater ads show up everywhere. This is the way you do it. You can take back your internet privacy today. Find out how. 3 months free. Simply go to expressvpn.com/majority. That's Express, expressvpn.com/majority for 3 months free with the 1-year package. Visit expressvpn.com/majority to learn more. Folks, it is that time of the year. Hanukkah. Still may have time with Hanukkah. Still may have time. But at the very least, you could give a picture for Hanukkah, and then definitely you're good for Christmas right now. Gift shopping for him can seem impossible, yes? Thankfully, Harry's makes long-lasting quality products at a super reasonable price with sets starting at just $10. I think I sent my dad his first Harry's razor 2 years ago for Hanukkah. I can't even remember now. If he doesn't love it, returns are quick and hassle-free. Harry's has been one of our longest-term sponsors now. You all heard my favorite razor is the chrome, the molded chrome handle. Features of Harry's I like, the smaller blade size. And I mean, I just like I have to say that when you hold a nice razor, I don't know, you feel good.
It's like fine cutlery.
Exactly. As a special offer for fans of this show, we partnered with Harry's to give you $5 off any shave set, including our limited edition holiday sets, when you go to harrys.com/majority report. Plus, you'll get free shipping. The offer is for new and returning customers. It's only available for the holidays. Generally, what they do is they just give a break on new customers, but this is for everybody. Each Harry's shaving set comes with an ergonomic weighted handle with an option to engrave. That's a nice gift. German-engineered 5-blade cartridges that provide a close, comfortable shave, foaming shave gel for a rich lather, a travel cover to protect your blades, a handsome holiday gift box. Or you can get something for yourself. Redeem a Harry's trial offer to experience the quality of shave before committing. Get your holiday shopping done early. Free shipping ends on December 12th, so act now. Go to harrys.com/majority report to get $5 off a shave set while supplies last. That's harrys.com/majority report. All right, quick break. When we come back, Marcy Wheeler. We are back. Sam Seder on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the program journalist, proprietor of EmptyWheel.net, author of Anatomy of Deceit, How the Bush Administration Used the Media to Sell the Iraq War and Out a Spy. Marcy Wheeler, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so a lot of activity last week. Let's start first with the collapse of the Manafort plea deal. Broadly characterize that sort of collapse, I guess, and what the implications are.
Well, collapse. I mean, it was built by Mueller such that if Manafort continued to act like he's been acting from the start, he would probably get some advantages of it in any case. So there are two questions. Why didn't Manafort cooperate, and where does that leave Mueller? The why didn't he cooperate, two possible answers. One is he's a compulsive liar, which he is. Remember that the whole way through the prosecution, both of these prosecutions, he was continuing to reach out to his GRU contact, or his Konstantin Kalemnik, who's been accused of having ties to GRU. And that is, according to the Wall Street Journal, one of the things he's not telling the truth about. So he continues to act like he has been acting. It may also be that he is continuing to pursue a pardon. That, certainly Trump seems to think he's continuing to float a pardon for him, and that part of getting a pardon is staying in good with Trump and refusing to tell the truth about Trump. So that may be why it collapsed. But what's interesting is, again, Mueller seemed to expect that something like this might happen, and so on Friday, Friday if not before, he is going to submit a report laying out some of the lies that Manafort told, which by definition are going to tell us both what Manafort and possibly even Trump finds to be the most sensitive information, and also at least some hint of what kind of proof that Mueller has that he is lying.
Okay, all right. So, So let me just see if I have this straight. They have a deal where Manafort is supposed to provide all sorts of information. It becomes clear to Mueller that Manafort is not providing that information. Let's just start with the timing. Presumably, right? We're not talking just Manafort tells one lie, and it didn't just happen, last Sunday. Manafort has been telling a series of lies, right? Theoretically about ongoing behavior or past behavior. What does the timing of Mueller saying okay, now we've decided you've told enough lies? What do you think triggered that?
So Manafort entered this plea agreement on September 14th. So basically the day before his D.C. trial was about to begin, which meant that rather than have the entire pre-election period focused on Trump's criminal campaign manager, instead that kind of disappeared and went quiet for a while. Over the course of the next several weeks, Manafort met, depending on which news source you follow, he met with him either 9 or 12 times, supposedly sharing information. Right before, right after the election, that's when the first status report is due. So from the beginning, the judge had said, okay, let me hear back from you in 2 months. The night before that was due, both sides, but it was Mueller because, Mueller was the one running the plea agreement. Both sides said, hey, we need 10 more days. And in that 10-day period, we know that the day they asked for 10 days is a day that Trump was originally going to hand in his open book test answers to Mueller, and that in that 10-day period, Trump actually did. So Mueller gets the answers to Trump's open book test and then says, Manafort's been lying. And I've argued that it is possible. I mean, people have misinterpreted what I have said. I don't think that Mueller entered the plea agreement not believing that Manafort could plead his way, cooperate his way out of these criminal charges. I'm sure he did that in good faith, but I'm sure, but it's clear that he built it so that he had protection if Manafort continued to act like Manafort had been. The timing question, though, the short version of the timing question is, through that entire period, Manafort and Trump continued to compare notes. And if Trump filled out his open book test, they're called interrogatories, but I call it an open book test because that's really what it is. If they compared notes through the time that Trump was doing his open book test and believed that they had settled on a cover story, then by waiting until he had Trump's answers, then he may have both Manafort and Trump telling the same lies. Now, Trump's lawyers did know, and Manafort's lawyers did know, before he finally turned in his open book test that Mueller had deemed Manafort uncooperative. But nevertheless, there's, for example, somebody who's probably Rudy Giuliani, speaking off the record, has already said, Trump's answers matched Manafort's on questions like, did Trump know about the June 9th meeting ahead of time? And so this might be something, Sam, that we'll learn on Friday. It might be that Mueller will submit this report on Friday and say, Manafort claimed that Trump did not know about the June 9th meeting either ahead of time or even after it happened. And here are some emails that we have that show that he did, and that Manafort is lying, and that, oh, by the way, Trump just lied in his open book test. So that could be something that happens on Friday.
Okay, so did Mueller know that Manafort and Trump still had this joint defense agreement during the time where Manafort was supposedly, planning to cooperate? And is that weird? Wouldn't you as a prosecutor be like, oh, and incidentally, you can't, you have to end your relationship with one of the guys we may be investigating because I don't want them to know what we know?
Yeah. Again, Mueller built this plea agreement, I assume very consciously. The guy is not flying off the handle here. And so unlike Rick Gates's plea agreement, which included a gag. So Rick Gates is not allowed to go blabbing about what he's telling to the prosecutor. Manafort did not include that. So technically he was not prohibited from sharing that information. And at least one lawyer argues that DOJ has a specific regulation saying you can't force somebody out of a joint defense agreement if they're entering into a plea agreement. And contrary to what you might read in credulous reporting in the New York Times, that was not discovered after the fact. The day that Manafort went into his plea agreement, Rudy Giuliani was out there saying, hey, we know about this, we're cool with it, he's not going to cooperate against Trump. There was another Politico report about midway through making it clear that Kevin Downing, who is Manafort's lawyer, continued to check in with Rudy Giuliani. So unless Mueller and all his lawyers and his press staff were hiding under the bed or something, they knew about it. They knew this was ongoing. And I only assume that they were then being very careful about showing Manafort the evidence that they had collected. In other words, it may have been, and I wrote this post about halfway through saying, who's paying Kevin Downing? Who's paying Manafort's lawyers to be a mole for Donald Trump? It may have been that Mueller's prosecutors were very careful to say, are you sure that Donald Trump didn't know about that June 9th meeting, without saying, by the way, here's your emails making it clear that he did.
Right. And
that's hypothetical. I'm not saying I know that to be the case, but we know, for example, that the Trump people avoided handing over emails involving Manafort on the June 9th meeting. So it's one of the things that's quite possible.
Is it possible that Mueller was also giving sort of fake information to Manafort? Like, here's our playbook. We're going to do an end sweep against the Patriots. No, not like that.
No, I mean, it just, it'd be cool to do that, but that's completely inconsistent with everything we know about Mueller. I mean,
okay. So he's not saying he's not giving information that Manafort would tell, or that Manafort's lawyer would then tell the White House, and the White House would write that in their what you call open book test. It comes back to Mueller, and he's like, "Wow, I can really see this. I just, this was like barium. I just ran through the system to see where it went."
No, I mean, it might be that I have been going back to 2004. I've been critical of Robert Mueller when he deserves it, but that's not the kind of thing I expect out of Robert Mueller. I think it more likely that he would do something like show Manafort an email and say, so you're sure that this email doesn't indicate any knowledge of the June 9th meeting, and not show, this is not, it is not a lie by silence. If
right.
They're not obliged to say, look, we've got 7 pieces of evidence showing that you did meet with Trump about this meeting ahead of time. He doesn't have to show him that.
Right.
And presumably didn't. That I think falls short, and this is why I'm trying to be really clear about this, because a lot of right-wingers took what I argued and said, oh, this is a trap. It's not a trap. It's just, Mueller was under no obligation to share everything he knew with Paul Manafort, and given the response to the report last week and the hearing last week, I suspect that's what happened, that he didn't share that he had. I mean, the same thing happened, Sam, back in June when Mueller caught Manafort witness tampering, and he caught him back in April, right? So back in April, he was following as Manafort was going out to these people who were going to be witnesses in this trial and saying, just so you know, here's what the cover story is. I suspect it's very similar to that Mueller found the evidence, collected the evidence, backed up the evidence, and didn't share it with Manafort until such time as it was too late for Manafort to get out of it. And I suspect that we're going to see something similar on Friday if we don't see, say, charges in between now and then.
Okay, and but no, here we have, okay. So no fake stories that could get communicated back as a way of indicating that they were passing that information.
No, and you wouldn't even need to do that. I mean, first of all, because Manafort has been so obtuse about the many ways he's been caught in ongoing law breaking since he's been under indictment, that I don't think it would take it, and none of the people around Donald Trump are at all intelligent about this stuff. But there is zero possibility that Mueller's team is going to shade it all on the wrong side of bad faith when you're dealing with the president. I don't think any prosecutor would. And so I don't think it would amount to an outright lie.
Just remind people who Kilmnick is. I mean, I'm not pronouncing his name right, but this is Manafort's friend, contact, longtime business associate. What?
Longtime business associate. So he is a guy who Rick Gates is on the record told the prosecutors that he knew was a former GRU officer. So GRU is the Russian military intelligence. They're the guys who hacked the DNC. So it just so happens that Paul Manafort, the guy who was working for free, that's in scare quotes, for Donald Trump during his campaign, one of his longest-term business associates also happened to be a former GRU officer, the same intelligence group that hacked Hillary Clinton. And they have continued to be in touch, or at least were through June, throughout the time that Manafort was under indictment. And we know, according to the Wall Street Journal, one of the questions that Manafort purportedly lied about is whether after being fired by Trump in August of 2016, he went on a yacht trip with Tom Barak, who's the guy who got him hired in the first place and is a huge Trump donor. And they met up with Konstantin Kilimnik there. And there's a bunch of reasons to believe that Konstantin Kilimnik it was basically serving as a go-between between Manafort and Oleg Deripaska and a bunch of other Russian oligarchs. So the key avenue of influence between the people who hacked Hillary Clinton and the Trump campaign, or one of the key ones, would be right through that dude. And that is one of the things, according to the Wall Street Journal, that Manafort was lying about when, if he lied, he was going to go to prison for maybe the rest of his life. And so that's what he did, was that's at least what Mueller claims he lied.
So on Friday, we're going to hear, or by Friday, we're going to hear at least a lot more to this story about Manafort. This is Mueller basically saying to the judge, here's why, here's what he lied about. The judge makes essentially a finding of fact, right? Like that, okay, here are the facts as you lay it out, Mueller, and here is the deposition that, or the interview that you had with Manafort, so it is clear that he's lying. What are the implications of what Mueller's going to say and the judge making some type of finding of fact? Is that fact, like, what is the durability of those findings? Or is it just limited to this case with Manafort?
I talked about how in June Mueller caught Manafort witness tampering. It was a similar kind of event where he said, "Whoa, something's going on, and I'm gonna submit a report to you on Friday." And by the time that Friday, the Friday in June, rolled around, he had indicted Manafort for those lies. And I wouldn't rule out that happening here, because if he indicts Manafort for those lies, and possibly for, the conspiracy in chief, the conspiracy with Russians in chief, if he indicts Manafort for those, then the probable cause that a grand jury would find, the probable cause that he committed those crimes, would be far beyond what the judge in this case has to reach, because the way the plea agreement was set up, again, in distinction from Rick Gates, where the standard of evidence to declare him breaking the plea agreement there was preponderance of evidence. In Manafort's case, it's just good faith. So it's a really low bar that Mueller has to reach in this report on Friday to be able to claim that that Manafort was lying. But I don't rule out the possibility, because he's done it in the past, that rather than give Amy Berman Jackson, the judge in this case, the headache of having to, say, okay, you lied and you're going to prison for the rest of your life, they can just, indict it, and then she doesn't have to make that decision. If, any judgment on her case is done. And there are reasons they might want to do that. So I leave that out as a possibility.
Okay, I'm sorry. Just to be clear, the indictment could be submitted to the judge, and then the judge says, okay, fair enough. The indictment indicates that he breached his agreement. Right. It would still have to go through a court order, right? There would still have to be some process beyond the indictment, but the indictment would take care of all the sort of like decision-making process, or I guess assessment process. Right.
Okay. Right. But in any case, the standard here is really low. If they don't do that, then they'll submit a report. Manafort's lawyers will stall in hopes, I guess, that the president will pardon him in the interim period, or maybe that Mueller will get fired in the interim. Who knows? And then they'll respond, and eventually, and again, because the standard is really low here, and I can't imagine that the Mueller crowd doesn't have their ducks in order. Eventually, Amy Berman Jackson would rule for Mueller, and then what happens then is, first of all, the stuff that's already in place, it continues. So they made a plea agreement, and the plea agreement allowed them to seize $46 million of Paul Manafort's ill-gotten goods, and that's all been processing while this has gone on. So, and there's only a challenge to $13 million of that. So So already what has happened since Manafort made that plea agreement and failed to abide by it is that something in the order of $33 million of his property is either already has been or is well down the road of being taken away and put in the U.S. Treasury. And, oh, by the way, that pretty much pays for the entire Mueller investigation by itself.
Does Manafort have more money?
Huh?
Does he have more
well,
money?
Well, that's the other question. No, he shouldn't. It took him 6 months to find enough liquid and legal assets to be able to get bail. So he can't have that much more in the United States in legal form. But there's, this notion that he's going to get a plea agreement and that's better. I mean, he's going to get a pardon and that's better than whatever he's got in front of him. Strongly suggests. I mean, that only makes sense if he's got another option. And, the other option, maybe that I've been, hypothetical. Again, one of the things that Manafort allegedly lied about to prosecutors is payments from lobbying in Ukraine. So my guess is one of the things that we're going to learn on Friday, if not before, is that he's been hiding, say, another $100 million of ill-gotten goods in Cyprus or something like that. And Mueller is going to say, here's all the money that you've been hiding and still is, that you're not. Let me charge you with another $100 million of tax evasion charges. How about that? As a way to kind of re-up the pressure on Manafort. I mean, that's one thing that could happen in the next week or the next little while. But my guess is that he continues to hide wealth outside of the country, and therefore, by lying about it, that also means he's evaded taxes and then could be charged again for those.
So what do you think has been the game here with Manafort? I mean, broadly speaking, like he thought he could get away with this? Or do you think, I mean, I've heard the theory that the idea is like he didn't have to pay for a lawyer, or I should say a lawyer litigating these cases. He took the plea deal. It falls apart, but it's basically a punt. And the further down the road he can get without expending money, he just waits for Trump's pardon. Or is it just an enormous amount of hubris that I suppose is, not particularly unwarranted? These guys got away with this stuff for decades, it feels like, and, never anticipated that they'd be scrutinized in this way. But what is it, do you think?
Both, but I mean, there's no way you continue the DPA, the JPA, the Joint Defense Agreement, the JDA, without expecting a pardon.
Right.
I mean, what you're doing through that whole process is, again, I've used this term, serving as a mole inside the Mueller investigation, reporting back to Trump, and that may have been useful for Mueller in that lead up to the election to kind of get, kind of placate Trump and get him to turn back in his open book test and start moving forward on the resolution of this whole thing. But, the thing is that, 90% of the lawyers you see on cable are talking about normal legal proceedings, probably 95%, probably 99%. And normal legal proceedings involve defendants who maybe down the road might imagine getting some kind of clemency. But Paul Manafort is a guy who every action he's taken seems to be premised on his best option being getting a presidential pardon.
Right.
There are still questions about that. I mean, he is liable to be charged in Virginia and New York for tax evasion, because if you've evaded taxes at the federal level, you've done so at the state level as well. And Trump can't pardon those. And those jails, those prisons, state prisons are far less accommodating to a guy with the lifestyle of Paul Manafort.
Right.
And, it may be that he avoids Virginia. It may be that he spends the rest of his life in Club Fed or in a Virginian state prison. If I were in Paul Manafort, I would choose the former. But again, there are no.
But doesn't he know that? I mean, doesn't he look at this and say? Doesn't his attorneys say, like, look, there are all sorts of state charges that they can bring that theoretically Donald Trump can't touch. Tish James in New York is not going to she's going to build her career on the opportunity to prosecute you. Or, I would imagine the same with all these state AGs. Like this is not something they're going to shy away.
Not Florida, because Florida is
not Florida. Not Florida. but
yes. Tish James could build her career by making sure that Manafort does the rest of his life in prison. And therefore, it is unreasonable to assume that a pardon is going to fix all of Manafort's ills. But nevertheless, there's no good legal background for these people, and most of these people. I mean, it was funny, and when Michael Cohen submitted his sentencing memorandum last week, so many people who've been following this case just let out this collective sigh of relief, because finally we're seeing competent lawyering. That, like, all of these people, Trump especially, but including, Manafort doesn't have the best lawyers in the world, and he's a terrible client. I mean, I wouldn't want to work for him, which is why people don't want to work for him or for Trump. And so, it could be that if a really competent defense attorney were advising Manafort, they would have cooperated already, as Rick Gates did, right? But this is the crazy thing about this story, is that you can't make reliable analysis when the pardon is on the table and has been from the start, and when the lawyers really aren't up to the job. It's not universally true, but it's true of a lot of these defendants.
It's a little bit like trying to predict monkeys playing chess on some level. They're just not necessarily making rational decisions because they don't.
They're not going to make the moves that every skilled chess player knows because they're monkeys playing chess. That's a good analogy.
Oh, well, thank you. So Cohen, is he that later in the week Cohen goes in and says, yeah, I lied to Congress. What are the implications of Cohen lying to Congress?
The implications of Cohen lying to Congress are that Mueller used it as an opportunity to write up 9 pages, making it clear that the Trump Tower deal that Cohen allegedly stopped pursuing in January of 2016 actually went through at least June of 2016, and according to BuzzFeed's reporting, went through at least July of 2016, and according to other reporting, went through the inauguration. So in other words, from a legal standpoint, it's nothing. I mean, from a legal standpoint, charged with what Cohen was already charged with in New York, being charged with an additional count of lying really isn't going to add to his prison time. It's just not. But what it did is it means he's going to have 2 prosecutors who sometime this week will say, you know what, he's been pretty helpful going after these criminal organizations that all by the way, are named Trump. He's been pretty helpful for us. And so you're going to have Mueller say that, as well as the Manhattan prosecutors who charged him for helping Trump hide the Stormy Daniels story during the campaign with the involvement of Trump organization, right? But it, as I said, like, people keep talking about this kind of fantastic report that Mueller has been writing all this time, and I keep saying, look, the report is right there, out there in the open, and this is another example of it. Mueller has just laid out evidence that that Trump was considering working with a GRU. This is the same Russian military intelligence again, a GRU tied bank to build the biggest hotel in Moscow in the same period when his son, who, by the way, is an executive of Trump Organization and was in the loop on these negotiations, took a meeting saying, this is part of the package that Russia is offering your dad as part of election year assistance. And so that dramatically changes the connotation of that email that Rob Goldstone sent to Don Jr. Because given that Don Jr. knew that there was something to be gained in the form of a big new licensing agreement in Moscow that they had been chasing for a decade, right?
Mm-hmm.
Given that Don Jr. knew that was on the table, him accepting that meeting, that June 9th meeting, is dramatically different. Even before you get into the fact that Mueller included in that story that he told about Cohen, that that after the June 9th meeting or the day of the June 9th meeting, Cohen basically made plane reservations to go to St. Petersburg as if he was acting on having reached an agreement. And then on June 14th, he canceled his plane reservations as if responding to the public news that the disclosure that the DNC knew that they had been hacked by the GRU. So that's a dramatic part of the story that Mueller used Cohen's cooperation to tell. And he's still got Cohen on. I mean, one of the things he's not doing is he's not yet saying your cooperation has been substantial enough. We think that you should get no time, even though Cohen is asking for it. That we think you should get no time for your for all your other crimes. Cohen's going to have to keep going back to Mueller's office and telling him more of the story.
And presumably, there's a lot more, right? I mean, like maybe not even. Like Cohen's been his lawyer for over a dozen years, and I gotta think that it's not just I did illegal payments for one particular adult actress, and also just lied about one real estate deal. Like presumably Cohen did a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah. So Cohen was involved in the loop of some other dodgy deals with people in the neighborhood of the former Soviet Union. There's a Kazakh group that, in particular, people had pointed to his involvement in. So he's been involved in these corrupt negotiations in the past. So that presumably is one of the things he's been talking about. He, in 2011, is the guy who set up the dark money group that basically funneled Trump Organization money into a presidential investigative committee for Trump. That was illegal, but Don McGahn, when he was an FEC commissioner, kind of said, oh, we're not going to prosecute that. So, but Cohen was involved in that, which was the moment, by the way, that the world knew that Donald Trump wanted to become president. And included in that world are the Russians, right? So he was involved there, and he was also involved in the 2013 meetings to set up the Miss Universe contest in Moscow. And Aras Agalarov, the guy who set up the June 9th meeting, his people in the aftermath of that becoming clear were sort of like, whoa, Michael Cohen knows us. And so there's a backstory there that I'm sure he's explained to Mueller as well. And then Cohen was also, you know what, people don't talk enough about this, Dan, but Cohen and Elliot Broidy, who is about to get in a whole heap of legal trouble with this money laundering thing tied to Malaysia.
All right, and just to be clear, Elliot Broidy is the other big Republican donor who supposedly was Cohen's only other client besides Sean Hannity, who Broidy had Cohen supposedly pay off another would-be mistress, right, on his behalf, supposedly.
Right,
okay.
On his behalf, but there's a lot of reason to believe it might have been Trump. But they were fundraising chairs for the RNC and remained such. I mean, Cohen remained such for a really long time, and he was kind of self-dealing as part of that. So Cohen is there through the self-dealing of the RNC. Cohen is there through the inauguration, and he's self-dealing off of that as well. So, you know, the inauguration is a giant pay-to-play, and one of the things another plea agreement makes clear is that this Konstantin Kalimnik guy was buying tickets from the inauguration through straw donors. So this is an instance after Trump has gotten elected where suspected GRU, the guys who hacked Hillary Clinton, is hiding the fact that he's dumping money into Trump's pocket after he's won the election. So we got before, middle, and after with this relationship with the GRU, and Cohen is aware of all of that.
And theoretically, he's wetting his beak. I felt like I had to say that in the context of this.
Right. I mean, there's a lot he's got to chat with. And I mean, and this explains, I mean, one of the things that's really important to remember. So when he was raided back in April, Trump flipped out. Trump really flipped out. And that's when he said, I'm not going to cooperate with Mueller anymore. This is beyond the pale. You're going into my business dealings. What he knew when he set that red line about Mueller investigating his business dealings from the start is that he was going to find stuff like this, including the Trump Tower deal. But what happened in April is that he got to see what the Manhattan prosecutors had seized from Cohen. So unlike Manafort, like he doesn't know what prosecutors got from Manafort's condo back in July of 2017, but he does know what prosecutors got from Cohen's condo in April of 2018. And so at first he was like, oh my gosh, you're going after my personal lawyer. This is the worst thing. This is the worst thing. And about 2 weeks into that process, he was like, he's dead to me. And that he's dead to me line probably came around the time where he discovered that Cohen had been recording him in these conversations.
Right.
And that probably is when their relationship started. Like, he was going to buy off Cohen up until that point. He was going to pardon Cohen, and it was all going to blow over. And because Trump cares more about loyalty than sanity, as soon as he realized that Cohen had protected himself, then I think Trump cut him off, and that's why we've got the plea deal with Cohen, and things are beginning to spin out of control for Trump because he's the thing is he's not a competent, corrupt man.
Right.
He's gotten away with it up until now, but I said this really early on, pardoning or not pardoning, he didn't get a pardon until Trump came along. Commuting Scooter Libby's sentence is how George Bush and Dick Cheney managed to minimize the damage of outing Valerie Plame. And it really, I mean, it was a very delicate implementation of preventing him from flipping on Dick Cheney. And as it became clear that Trump was trying to do this, I said, I just don't think there's anybody in his universe that is competent enough to pull off what George Bush and Dick Cheney pulled off. Ain't going to happen. And everything we've seen thus far says that that's true. We'll see whether he can manage to keep Manafort quiet, but it may be too late. I mean, it may be that Mueller doesn't need Manafort. Might like him, might like him for the counterintelligence investigation to know more about the Russian intelligence collection on Americans, but certainly it didn't work with Cohen.
Okay, let's talk about Jerome Corsi. Jerome Corsi seems to be sort of a late entry, right? I mean, I feel like his name just sort of came out of nowhere like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Well, that's not actually true. Way back when the FBI stopped this guy named Ted Mallet, who has worked with Corsi, as he was flying into the country into Logan Airport back in March, one of the first things Mallet did was call Corsi. And he made it clear to Corsi that the FBI was asking him about Corsi. So if you were paying really close attention, you would have known in March that Corsi was going to be in Mueller's scope. It just took a long time for him to get there. He went and interviewed every other Roger Stone potential source for ties to WikiLeaks, and then in late August served Corsi with a subpoena. And Corsi, there was a lot of back and forth. Corsi says that he and Stone created a cover story back in August 2016, right? I'm going to write a post today or tomorrow laying out how they've got like a Russian doll set of cover stories that they are protecting together, Corsi and Stone. But those Russian dolls of cover stories, they start in August 2016, well before there's any investigation into this. Stone did something, and after he did that, whatever, he went to Corsi and said, Corsi, you need to help me build a cover story, only they didn't do it very competently. And one of the things Corsi did before his relationship with Mueller blew up is, under immunity, testified to the grand jury that he and Stone have been working on cover stories since August of 2016 about this source of information that they knew, and I've laid out why I believe even the public record shows that they not only knew that Podesta's emails were going to come out, but they knew that the content of Podesta's emails were going to support an attack they were already making against Podesta in August 2016. So that's where we're going to go. I don't know when we get there, but that's where we're going to
go. The story that came out last week in The Guardian, it's been sort of, even The Guardian itself has sort of rewritten it as to be a lot more conditioned and qualified, I guess. But the story was that Manafort supposedly visited Julian Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy starting, I think, in 2013 and as late as March of 20. Was it March or August of 2016? And so what do you make of that story? And is that, I mean, what's your assessment of that story, and what would be the implications if it's true?
I'm one of the 20 people, right, left, and center, pro, anti, and neutral on Assange who doesn't think that story holds up. There is a part of the story that is documented, and that is sometime in May or June or July of 2017, Manafort was in Ecuador, allegedly setting up a Chinese business deal, but there's reason to believe that he may have been trying to intervene on behalf of Assange. So that's been out there for a long time, and that is confirmed. What seems to have happened is there's this whole other allegation that Manafort was, bopping in for visits with Julian Assange. And there might be a nugget of truth to that. I mean, one of the things that is important for people to know is that this guy named Adam Waldman, who was kind of he's a lawyer, but he was mostly just doing lobbying for Oleg Deripaska, who is one of the oligarchs who owns Paul Manafort. He also was doing some work for Julian Assange in 2017, trying to get him a pardon. And so Oleg Deripaska has ties to both Assange and Manafort in interesting ways, in ways that may have to do with the Steele dossier as well. Christopher Steele did some work for Deripaska as well. Deripaska was a source for him. So that universe of people all kind of comes together. So it's not unreasonable to suggest that there might be ties through that network. But the notion that Paul Manafort was able to waltz into the Ecuadorian embassy and visit Julian Assange without getting picked up either by the visitor logs, which have already been released, or by some no longer friendly to Julian Assange staffers who would have leaked it long ago, is
hard to believe. Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing is there's just so many kinds of surveillance going on the embassy, and Manafort's operational security stinks. So the notion that he'd be able to kind of clandestinely sneak into the embassy and go visit with Julian Assange, I don't find that believable.
There was also a line in that Guardian story that talked about what Manafort was wearing on one day, which I thought was very odd.
I know.
The implication being that we have a video of him, right? I mean, that's what that is saying. But who would have that video, and who would have leaked that information? Is that more just sort of like an Ecuadorian, Manafort being used in the context of an Ecuadorian fight, or was that supposed to be some type of rat F, or to sort of say like, oh, look at how crazy people are getting with all these crazy ideas about Manafort, or was it supposed to be some type of metaphor?
I think it's possible it's disinformation. It's possible a number of people who are real close to the Assange story note that part of this story goes back to Ecuadorian intelligence, and the kind of mainstream Ecuadorian intelligence hates Assange. They've got reason to want to burn Assange. So it could be that. But there is a big battle within Ecuador right now about whether or not Assange is going to be booted from the embassy. And it also wouldn't surprise me if some of the people thinking that Ecuador needs to continue to respect the asylum claim of Julian Assange, it wouldn't surprise me if they released that as disinformation to undermine, the case that Assange should be booted and extradited to the United States. The funny thing about the claim about what he was wearing is that, this is a guy who wears ostrich skin jackets, right? He is not a sloppy dresser. And they described him as walking in chinos. And it's like, that's not Paul Manafort, It's not Paul Manafort because he would not be caught dead in London not wearing a full suit. Not going to happen.
Just on the sort of the metaphorical standpoint, what do you? I mean, I'm asking you to speculate here, but what do you think the chances are that that Assange was in direct contact with someone like Manafort in some fashion, or, I mean, I guess Stone and Corsi, maybe we already know they are, but what's your sense on it?
Stone and Corsi are indirectly in touch with Assange. There's still something about the Mueller story that is going to be a big reveal. I don't know what it is, but because it's simply not against the law to speak to Lucifer 2.0. Tons of people did it, right? Or to Assange. Tons of people did that too. He's not yet, Mueller is not yet indicting Hannity, and Hannity, Hannity went at a very interesting time, by the way, to the embassy to go meet with Assange, and I don't doubt that he served as a cutout between Trump and Assange when he did that. But thus far, we haven't heard that Hannity is being investigated for doing that. So there has to be something more, and I suspect when we learn what it is, it's going to be a big reveal. But we don't know what it is. We don't, and so it's going to be more than just that. Jerome Corsi worked through go-betweens to figure out when. And as I said, Sam, I think the public record solidly backs the notion that they not only knew that Vesta's emails were coming, they knew specifically what some of the content was, because it's clear they anticipated it, and it's clear that on October 6, 2016, Jerome Corsi knew that it was coming. And so they had to have known ahead of time. The question is how and whether that amounts to a crime.
Okay, so going forward, what should we be looking for? I mean, obviously, in the next couple of days, Mueller's going to file something that will, or maybe roll out another indictment of Manafort. But either way, it will be some mechanism in which to present to the court that Manafort has lied. He's broken his plea agreement, and now we're going to send him to jail for a long, long time. What's next, do you think?
One thing we know is next is the sentencing submissions for Mike Flynn are going to be submitted.
And what are the implications of that? I mean, so Flynn knows he's going to prison. He finds out how long he's going to prison, and what?
Well, he may avoid prison.
How would he do that?
He may avoid prison. Well, because he was only charged with false statements, so he would have the same range as Papadopoulos to begin with. And unlike Papadopoulos, we have every reason to believe he did cooperate and provide valuable information. So I would expect that unless there's going to be another surprise like there was with Papadopoulos and Manafort where we learn he wasn't cooperating, I would suspect that what we're going to learn is we're going to get a submission from Mueller's team that says, in traditional fashion, it would say he provided substantial cooperation. We think that he should just do probation, and that may be the default to expect. But Mueller has never not used these opportunities to tell a story. So I would expect at a minimum we're going to get a story that says, Flynn explained how in the transition period Donald Trump worked with the Russians to promise the Russians that he was going to overturn sanctions, and Flynn told us that was part of a payoff for a deal. I mean, that's the kind of thing that we might get next week in conjunction with the Flynn sentencing memo.
So Mueller is basically like releasing chapters of his book, essentially, not necessarily in serial form, but here's chapter 3, here's chapter 27. Here's chapter 17, basically just leaving it at different courthouses.
Right. Yeah. And that's what, I mean, there has been so much conversation about this report that Mueller is eventually going to release, most of that came from Rudy Giuliani. Rudy Giuliani has fooled himself into believing that this thing ends with when a report comes out and Mueller says, well, I wanted to charge Don Jr., but I really couldn't get enough evidence. And I imagine that Mueller allowed him to believe that. It is, in fact, the case that Mueller is required to submit a report. Right now it'll go to Matt Whitaker, the kind of hatchet job AG that Trump installed. But everything we've seen over the course of this, from the very first plea agreement with George Papadopoulos, has made it clear that Mueller wants to tell his stories in these charging documents. And unless he's fired tomorrow, I would expect that to continue.
Interesting. And lastly, Marcy, do you think that the idea of building that Trump Tower in Russia is enough? Does that provide some type of like motive? I mean, do you think that's the operative theory, that to the extent that Trump, was looking for, that was part of the quid pro quo, I guess?
It was part of it. I'm sure it was not all of it. And when you get to the Seychelles meeting in January of 2017, there were other things on offer. So it wasn't just a Trump Tower. Everyone around Trump was going to get rich by having sold out the country. And the place where the plan started falling apart, and the only place where the plan started falling apart, was in Donald Trump actually getting elected, right? So Donald Trump probably assumed he signed up in May of 2016 for, yes, I'm happy to accept a Trump Tower deal in Moscow, one I've been chasing for 10 years, with the understanding that I'm going to beat up relentlessly on Hillary Clinton, which I was going to do anyway, but I'm going to focus on the emails. I'm going to make the emails that you are releasing into something much bigger than they are. I'm going to make them a cornerstone of my campaign, which of course he did, right? And that was, I think, what Donald Trump signed up for in May of 2016, in June of 2016, when they took that Trump Tower meeting, the June 9th meeting, right? And he was happy to make promises that he would get rid of sanctions. He was happy to make promises that he'd work with Russia and Syria and Ukraine, because he didn't think he was going to win.
Right. So on some
level,
he
won, and that's when things started going haywire, because having won, all of a sudden there was a lot more scrutiny on this, and he thought in the first 2 months as president that he would be in a position to kill the investigation into how he got elected. And thus far, it hasn't worked out that way.
So if I understand you correctly, it's possible that Trump thought the Hillary Clinton, Oppo research that he was getting was not necessarily a get for him. That was a give. That you give me that material and I'm going to broadcast it for you. In return, we're all going to make a ton of money. And I would imagine, too, that when we talk about the Seychelles, that meeting was not just about Russia. It was also about the Saudis, right, and the UAE.
And the Israelis.
And the
Never
Israelis.
Forget the Israelis.
So I mean, we're really looking at, just a, sort of some type of network deal where it's just like, yeah, no, I'll broadcast this material for you. He didn't think it was going to help him win necessarily. He thought he was doing them a favor by weakening the next president for them.
Well, I think he was willing to do it because that's what he's always done. I mean, that's what he's been. He's been a troll. And guess what? A troll just won the presidency. But what's interesting, I talk a lot about Mueller's speaking indictments. When Manafort accepted a plea deal, Mueller released 40 pages of evidence. And the evidence all had to do with how Manafort worked with Yanukovych, the Ukrainian president, right? And part of that was the campaign against Tymoshenko, against his opponent, and the things he did to beat Tymoshenko and to kill Tymoshenko's career afterwards, all parallel what Manafort was doing for Hillary Clinton, doing against Hillary Clinton, down to accusing her of crime. Like the lock her up chant goes back to Ukraine when Manafort was working for Yanukovych. And so I suspect when the full story is told, Mueller wants to show that the 2016 election is just a repeat for Manafort of stuff he did before. And so to the extent that Trump hired and bought into the way that Manafort was going to run the campaign, he bought into running a campaign the same way that a Ukrainian Russian-backed oligarch would, which is what he is. He's a Russian-backed oligarch, right? So that's the story that we're eventually going to get. And so I think it was, like the biggest problem with the story, like, I think you're right. Did he think he was doing Russia a favor, or did he think it was a gift from Russia? I think it's both. And I think that Mueller certainly is moving towards a conspiracy case where the terms of this deal are laid out. But it's not a traditional quid pro quo because they're both in bed together. I mean, everyone's benefiting if you debase American democracy by running a presidential campaign like Trump did. Trump was willing to do it, but that's who Trump is. The Russians, that was a win-win-win for the Russians until Trump proved unable to ditch the legal investigation.
Huh. Marcy Wheeler, always a pleasure. The blog is emptywheel.net. Thank you so much for your time today. Fascinating stuff.
Thanks, Sam. Take care.
Bye-bye. There you go. Win, 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 win. It's all coming home now. That's fascinating. It never really occurred to me to look at it that way, that it was like, I get something to talk about. This is win-win. I got, you want me to weaken Hillary Clinton, and I had nothing to talk about during the election anyway. So now I got the email.
Pro everybody, except for Hillary.
It's just like that time where those girls who love to pee on guys came over to the hotel room, and I was like, yeah, you can pee on me.
You can do that. You love to do it, and I want it. It's also like the guy who called Hillary a dog. It was just a great line. And
who's working for who here? It doesn't matter. We're all getting paid.
This is all voluntary anyway.
Yeah, do what you love, and you'll never work a day in your life.
There you go.
A thing called free association.
All right, folks. Speaking of which, it is your support that makes the show possible. Who's getting paid here? I don't know. This is a win-win-win for all of us. As long as the cops don't find out, we're all going to be good. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. Jointhemajorityreport.com. When you become a member for just a couple of bucks a week, you support the free show every day. And then we say thank you by giving you the fun half, ladies and gentlemen. Also, what your membership dollars do, they support the upgrading of equipment, working on a system to get higher quality audio interviews. We're working on a system where occasionally we'll be able to do video interviews as well.
Pajama boys over.
And now have at least 3 shows that regularly work out of this office. So the higher production value cuts across all multiple products and probably more in the future. And then, of course, it raises the game for everybody in the entire industry.
Competition.
Competition spreads, kicks in. And
I ran into a listener at a Brazil event, and he came up and introduced himself to me, and he said, "You guys are like the Wu-Tang Clan of left-wing podcasts."
There you go.
That's how I think of myself.
Said, that's perfect.
That's Matt certainly thinks of himself that way. So go to jointhemajorityreport.com, become a member today. Also, justcoffee.coop, like in the next 2 weeks, 30% off. You don't need a coupon code or anything. Just head over there, 30% off, justcoffee.coop. This is a great time for you to try all sorts of Just Coffee. See if you like the MR blend. See if you like the, I can't remember the name. What's that one with the women from the Guatemalan collective? Los Diosas blend is one of my favorites. Bike Fuel, another one of my favorites. Doesn't matter. Majority Report is really the one you should get. And also, we're selling out our January 13th live show. Brendan told me yesterday was the first day that we sold under 10 tickets a day. So at this pace, I can't do the math, but you don't have much we're not going to probably have tickets by the end of December at this pace. So, Jesus, by mid-December at this pace.
It's going to be like Jingle All the Way. People trying to get the last ticket.
I'm not familiar with
the
that.
Arnold Schwarzenegger movie?
I didn't see it.
Okay.
That was after my time.
Oh, I did see that movie. That's a great point. There's going to be MR people fist
Who don't get
fighting
their
each
tickets,
other in front of the Bell House for the last tickets. I love it.
So head to majority.fm. There you can see a link to our tickets, a link to Michael's live show in February. And speaking of Michael's show in February, tomorrow's not February. So
tomorrow, I want to, tomorrow, of course, TMBS will be live at 7 p.m. NYC time. On the Michael Brooks Show YouTube channel, of course, patreon.com/TMBS, and on iTunes. On Sunday, the Patreon content was on The Daily Show Generation and Logic for the Left, which is a really interesting case for the left to actually embrace logic and facts and win with them. Of course, I'm pretty allergic to that kind of argument, but it was fascinating. Patreon.com/TMBS.
And Jamie?
Yeah, so this week on the Antifada, Sean and I do a recap of our trip to Mexico and all the things we got up to there, including our visit to the Casa de Leon Trotsky, as well as the autonomous Zapatista community of Oventique, where we got to see actually existing libertarian socialism. Very, very cool. We got to speak with the junta there. It was a really amazing experience for us. So we give a little background on the Zapatista uprising and the continuing struggle in Chiapas. We also tell a little love story about how our good friend who was traveling with us met a girl on Tinder in San Cristobal who ended up coming on our psychedelic journey to Isla Holbox with us.
Wow. I didn't realize you could do that internationally, that stuff.
He
can't do Tinder internationally?
I didn't even occur to me.
An app,
the language of love is universal.
ExpressVPN. You can
you
can match.
Is that
Bumble
true?
ExpressVPN? Yeah, my podcast is called Literary Hangover. I would enjoy if you would download some of those episodes and listen to them.
Sweet.
Did you know? Well, we'll talk about that in the fun half. But that Red Dead, I didn't realize that thing came out 10 years ago, the first version.
The first one, yeah.
I had no idea. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's pretty fun.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920 is the number. See you in the fun half. I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my
first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook.
Throw our hands up.
Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
we are back, ladies and gentlemen. It is the fun half of the program. We mentioned earlier that George Herbert Walker Bush Sr., as we call him, passed away. He was old.
He had a good run.
Yeah, he had a good run. Oversaw at least one war where tens of thousands were killed.
Also, all the covert actions.
Right. Not to mention all the things he probably did in the CIA. Had to go arrest Noriega so that Noriega didn't spill the beans.
If Noriega ratted out, the whole pipeline through Latin America would be ruined.
He had a rich life. I mean that both literally and metaphorically. He was extremely wealthy. One of my favorite quotes was from his sister, Nancy Ellis, who in the 1988 election was trying to make it sound like George Bush Sr. was an average guy, despite the fact that he was mystified by the scanners of a supermarket.
Oh my God, Sean just told me about that.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
Can you imagine the erection that Bill Clinton got when he saw that, though? It's just like, the scanner.
Well,
I'm gonna take this.
This was during Dukakis. And
it was during, I thought it was during 92. Wow.
I'm pretty sure it was during.
Are you serious? Dukakis couldn't even cap. I'm pretty sure that was during Clinton.
Maybe. And but the quote where he's just an average guy, his sister said something to the effect of, and I tweeted it out. I couldn't find the link, but I'm quite sure that was the quote. We were raised by strict Midwestern parents. If we left our tennis rackets out in the rain, we got punished.
It was in 92.
On top of which, George Bush was able to pardon a couple of guys who probably would have implicated him in the Iran-Contra deal.
More than a couple, right? Wasn't it quite a few?
Well, two of the biggies, were Cap Weinberger, and I can't remember the second one off the top of my head. I probably should have
Donald Trump should definitely not pardon anybody that can implicate him in a criminal conspiracy.
Right, exactly.
It would be big undermining of normalcy. Now, everybody involved in the cocaine shipment pipeline to fund paramilitaries, I'm just gonna give them a nice little slew of pardons before we have an illegal invasion of Panama.
He also, in an attempt to prove his bona fides to his right-wing base, completely ignored the existence of HIV and AIDS to the detriment of thousands of people's lives and arguably ending of people's lives.
Haven't even mentioned the Horton ad.
Can't
Yeah,
them all.
laid the groundwork for racist campaigns to this very day.
Well, he voted against the Civil Rights Act first time around, or said he would have in his first race for Congress. I think it was in '64. Of course, Willie Horton, and he even implied that there was something really mysterious about Dukakis for being Greek, for being of Greek
I
heritage.
think we know what that means.
And
studied what the Greeks did up at Yale. The symposium wasn't just an exploration of ideas.
But my understanding is a lot of people thought that the Bushes were actually contrary to the sort of the look that they have in public, real a-holes. And, that they were more of the ilk of like Barbara when she went to that Houston Astrodome and looked around and said, look at all these people here who had been displaced from New Orleans. Like, they have a better lifestyle here
It's actually
than they do
it's
at home.
working out very
Right.
well for them. That's the verbatim
So
quote.
I just want to say that George Bush Sr. has passed. I think to a certain extent, there's a very good argument that almost implicit in being and necessary in being a president of the United States, that you are somewhat sociopathic or you are a war criminal or, you have to, but I would say that, and to the extent that that's true or not, I don't know. I'm not capable of making that assessment. But if it is true, Bush would be in the sort of like, I would say top 25%, maybe top 20% of the worst.
And don't forget, he was a prolific groper in his twilight years.
David Copperfield.
I was going to ask a question about that. That was serious. How many times do you think he faked his own death so he could grope a nurse?
That's right.
It's like, I'm not breathing anymore. David Copperfield.
Right, exactly.
That was
so I'd like to take this time to remember him. I mean, not the least of which, like, how about raising your family better so that we don't get George Jr. But and I left out his basically telling the Shias to rise up.
The Kurds.
And the Shias, too.
And the Shias, too. But the Kurds were, The
Kurds,
just total
but the
mass
Shia,
murder.
he said in the South, like, rise up.
Right.
And
Rise up.
also was very, I don't know that we have the real story about how Saddam thought he could invade Kuwait and that it was okayed. But we certainly do have the real story as to the lies that were sold to the American public as a way of getting into that first Gulf War. I just am referring to, people can look it up, the story of the babies in the incubators that were being killed in Kuwait. But with all that said, I want to just recognize that a former president has passed. And I know for me, I look back, and this was one of those memories I had of George Herbert Walker Bush that I will never forget. Can we roll that tape?
We have a fucking...
What?
That was George H.W. Bush.
Okay, here we go. And this is, of course, a famous clip where George Bush, I think it was in 1991, I believe, if I remember correctly. In fact, I made one of my first videos, 92. I made one of my first videos. I cut it between two video decks for Cross Comedy, starring David Cross, about this incident. And so it's always stuck with me. And so George Herbert Walker Bush, this is the way I would like to salute you, with the way that you saluted the Japanese Prime Minister Kiichi Miyazawa back in 1992 at a dinner in January. There he is. 4x3 video. He's not feeling so great.
This is really not feeling great.
Slumps over. And vomits on...
That's the weirdest vomiting I've ever seen.
The Prime Minister's lap.
Little trick I learned in CIA school.
You just laid down and let it trickle out.
I needed to show the Japanese that I wasn't going to be a pushover in tariff negotiations. So what you do is you pretend you're ill.
And he came out and later with such great humor, he said something to the effect of like, I told Barbara just to roll me under the table and continue on with dessert.
Wow, that's funny.
Yeah.
Let me just indulge a couple of requests I've got for 5 seconds, which is, Jeb, stop being such homo. Dad, die. Stop crying. You are no bad.
Wait, I don't understand.
You don't remember Barbara Bush throw mama from a train from the primaries?
I do, but she's like
Jeb
mutated
is-
into
Jeb
like a
is crying.
Japanese samurai version of that. Did you not hear that?
I didn't hear that, but I guess Japan on the mind, subliminal influence.
You were, yeah, it all became.
Arigato, Jeb. I am fat samurai now. Jeb, you dishonor our family.
You must throw brother from train.
If you don't throw brother
It
from
sounds
train,
like
he
one of
gonna
those
be
like
president, and you gonna be governor of Florida, then national disgrace after you are cocked by a real estate developer.
Let's go to the phones. You're calling from a 952 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, is this me?
It is. Who's this?
This is Jack from Minnesota.
Jack from Minnesota. What's on your mind?
Hey, so I just wanted to call about the idea of framing left-wing ideas from a right-wing perspective. So I was talking to
The idea of
conservative friend of mine.
signing? Did you say? Oh, framing.
What?
Okay.
Framing, yeah. So I was talking to a right-wing friend of mine about universal basic income, which I actually don't really support, but I was just talking to him about it, and we were kind of having a discussion about it, and he wasn't interested in the idea until I kind of framed it from like a libertarian perspective, if that makes sense. So, I don't know. I was talking to him and I said, well, it's kind of just like a tax break for everyone, and you never don't get the money, and that it's possible to have a, if you're at the bottom of the rung, you can pay negative taxes. And he sort of was interested in the idea after it was framed like that. So I don't know.
Yeah,
do
well,
you
I mean,
find value.
Look, that's a tough one to crack because actually libertarians do support. I mean, it's not. Let me put it this way: it's not rare to find libertarians who support a universal basic income because they perceive it as a way of essentially getting rid of the welfare state. And that's what's actually problematic in my mind about a UBI is that from a political standpoint, not so much a policy standpoint, from a political standpoint, it makes vulnerable things that I don't want to make vulnerable. And so,
Sure. So you're saying it exposes programs that, like social programs, it'd be an excuse to gut social programs,
right,
in favor of just doing a basic income.
Right. And so in that particular policy prescription is not exactly the best example, but I think more importantly, I think there's value in reframing things to persuade people and to sell to a wider audience. But it might, I think, what's even better is just offering real sort of more material benefits and using those material benefits to get people who are less engaged, more engaged in the process. But I appreciate the call, Jack.
Okay.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Another quick call. Next up, calling from a 478 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Sam, I do believe this is Jeff in Georgia. How are you?
Jeff in Georgia. What's on your mind, Jeff?
Well, Sam, listen, I'm glad to get through to you today because you just recently had a birthday, and I got you a little present, man. I want you to know I did a little something for you. I convened a little focus group for you at great personal expense to myself to test the waters on Seder 2022. And I have some important data that I really want to share with you if you got a little time.
I have a little bit of time. 2022 seems far off at this point, and as does the entire concept of me running for Senate. But yeah, okay.
These things sneak up on you, man. So listen, I'm not going to sugarcoat for you. You got a good news, bad news situation. On the good news side, you strong. You're stronger than a lockjaw possum on the issues, Sam. That's good.
Oh.
But there's a real strong feeling that you're a little soft as one participant called you a punk ass bitch. I'm not sure who that was. They're from Washington or something. But Sam, we've got a dynamic action plan here that synergizes your core competencies to compensate for your marketing liabilities in the parlance of our times. I'm going to just go through a couple bullet points for you. Instead of simply nationalizing the big banks, consider personally robbing a bank. That would probably play really well. Let's maybe cut some ads of you advocating for socialized health care that includes the dental work on the Nazi you were in the middle of curb stomping in the face. That would be real nice.
All right.
Hell, Sam, if you could just fuck a soldier's wife, it would do a lot for your numbers. It really would. That would really pick it up for you, man.
Really?
So listen, I want you to
I can
shoot
think of
some of this
another
over.
configuration that might do better for
Of course, I'm not on the clock right now. You don't need to be sending me any checks or nothing yet. Okay, the invoices
I
will be a
think
long.
you started off by saying this was a birthday present, Jeff, but okay.
Well, hey, it's pro bono for a few months now, but of course my services are incredibly high in demand.
I understand.
I've got several comptrollers looking to swing a few elections down in rural Alabama, where apparently comptrollers hold dictatorial power in a sort of feudal society. It's weird down there. But anyway, man, I just want to wish y'all a happy week.
Thanks.
And everyone become a member of the Majority Report.
Thanks,
and
Jeff.
I have a podcast. Don't forget.
Yes. Folks, just a reminder before I forget, I appreciate the call, Jeff. Georgia has a special election. Is it tomorrow, December 4th, for the Secretary of State? Super important. If you're in Georgia, you got to get out and vote, and you got to get 5 other people to vote. 5 other people to vote tomorrow in Georgia. And then 2 days or 3 days later, I feel like it's the 8th in Louisiana. So check that out. What's Jeff's podcast name again? Is
Dissident Peasant.
Dissident Peasant. So check that out as well, ladies and gentlemen. All right, one more quick phone call. Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Sam. It's John from San Antonio.
John from San Antonio. What's on your mind?
Yeah, this weekend, my media ritual, consists of listening to Ring of Fire, which you are the host of. It features your excellent interviewing skills. In addition, this weekend, I was able to watch many of the excellent panels that was featured at the gathering at the Sanders Institute, which took place Thursday through Saturday. I highly recommend going to their Facebook page where all the panels are listed, and you can stream them all. I want to talk about 2 panels on Medicare for All. The first panel talked about promoting Medicare for All, featuring Joe Beardsmore, co-founder of UK Uncut, and he talked about a nationwide push for Medicare for All, which is being promoted by our evolution groups across the country, part of a door-knocking strategy where you listen to people to hear what their healthcare experiences are and go from there, and don't bombard them with numbers. While I agree with the health care should be a human right is the most effective argument to promoting Medicare for all. A lot of people will want to know about how to pay for it, and that was addressed in the second panel on Friday, featuring Michael Pollan, put out a 200-page peer-reviewed study, which is 18 months in the making. CommonDreams.org published an excellent article called "Easy to Pay for Something That Costs Less. New study shows Medicare for All would save $5.1 trillion over 10 years." It features Michael Pollan and Michael Leidy interview from the gathering, and has links to the 200-page study and criticism. Right now, taxpayers provide 60% of all health care expenditures, with over $2 trillion a year to cover Medicare, Medicaid, VA, and community health centers. So the amount required would only be $1.05 trillion in additional revenues. Households and private businesses will be able to pay for the system with an average of 9.6% less than they are contributing to the U.S. healthcare system now. Pollan's funding mechanism is different than Bernie's white paper. Poland has a 3.75 sales tax on non-necessities. Bernie's plan raises the individual rate from 1.45% individually to 4% per household, unless you're currently in poverty or close to poverty. And both plans essentially you don't have to pay anything for the plan if you're in that area.
Bernie raises the income tax. You're saying the income tax he raises. You said.
Well, he raises the Medicare rate that everybody pays right now.
So the payroll tax.
1.45.
Okay, the payroll tax.
Yeah, to 4%. He raises it right, and so.
And does
so
that
those
call
are the big
for raising the
differences.
cap as well?
I'm sorry?
Does that call for raising the cap? I mean, I guess your Medicare tax is paid. There is no cap on the Medicare part of the FICA.
Right, there is no cap. That was actually changed. There used to be a cap. I believe it was in '92 that was taken out. So multimillionaires are paying 1.45 on every penny that they earned. So yeah. So So the employers pay 7.5 on Bernie's plan. On Poland's plan, they pay 8.2 or 1.78% gross. And also the small businesses, the first $2 million are exempt in payroll taxes for Bernie's plan, and there's similar exemptions in the Poland plan. So the basic difference is the 3.45 tax on non-necessities, or 4.0 increase per household. And I think Bernie's plan is actually better. I think that I mean, what do you feel? Because I mean, everybody's going to have to pay that 3.5 to where if in the Bernie plan, if you're really struggling and you don't have much money, you're not going to have to pay that 3.45. You're just going to get everything, essentially as you do now. If you're like on
I think
a Medicaid.
The problem with making this with like a federal sales tax is what the guy is suggesting. Is that what?
Yes, that's what Poland suggests.
Yeah, I mean, a federal sales tax, I think what becomes problematic is then you're tied into how the economy is doing. You know what I mean? And I just, and then you also need a new apparatus to collect a federal sales tax, it strikes me. I mean, I think the simply raising the Medicare tax makes it a lot more straightforward. Remember how much you used to pay for your health insurance? Now you're not going to. Now it's just going to be an additional bump on your, on your payroll tax, and I just don't think that 2 to 3% sounds that much to your average person in that instance, and it's not, So I don't know. I mean, I think that is, without just my top of my head, that's my reaction in terms of like the taxing, but it's a good question. I'll look around to see what different people's assessment of that is. But I don't know. I tend to just sort of like shy away a little bit for sales taxes for something like that.
No, I agree with you completely. I think this is much better. Bernie's plan is much better, and his plan has more taxes on the rich. Now, the Poland plan also has taxes on the rich, but not quite as many. And so
well,
I
theoretically, think, non-essential items, right, would be considered. There might be an argument that that's a progressive tax. But I appreciate the call, John.
That becomes a terrain.
All right, thank you, Sam.
Define it.
What's that?
How you define essential and non-essential and that type of stuff.
Food, clothing under a certain amount. I don't know. Maybe home heating oil under a certain amount. I don't know. I don't know how you would do that.
Isn't that where like some of like the chain CPI stuff comes in though, with like them sort of starting to dispute what essentials are and what's the kind of price point on things, and that like becomes a Trojan horse for austerity?
How you assess what is in like a category. I mean, that's what the chain CPI is. The controversy around that is what products do you measure when you measure when you measure inflation? For old people, their set of products that they're buying is different than what it is for young people.
Right.
Hold on here. I'm clearing up. I got a lot of Russian. I always get these Russian.
Yeah, the first wave of IMs from Russia.
It's very weird.
Maybe they're all like
they always want to be first.
St. Petersburg Phil, and it's just like, I thought Marcy's point was interesting, but it ought to be funny. They're all actual content. We just can't read it.
Let's go to Dan Bongino.
Wait, Bong?
Dan Bongo.
Dan Bongo.
Dan Bongino. This guy's really
about the First Amendment.
Shooting up the charts in terms of
he's really
the right wing
subsidized.
talk. Yeah, he's heavily subsidized, this guy. And did he write this op-ed, or did he is he just talking about it? Here he is. He's going to drop a truth bomb on us about the asylum seekers. And that is that our asylum rules are far too narrow, and we are sending people who are living lives of misery away. But that somehow is problematic for him, but not in the way you would think.
DeRoy's idea is going to expose mass hypocrisy on the left, and here's why, Steve. We know now, just from interviews of people on the ground and from historical results of asylum seekers, that most of the people coming here are not, in fact, coming here for asylum. Some are, but not all. We know that because a lot of people's asylum rejection claims are rejected. Matter of fact, the overwhelming majority are. Most people are coming here for...
I just understand what that logic is. All those people who, let's say, start playing baseball at the beginning of the year and say they want to win the World Series, they're not really, because they don't all win it.
Yeah,
what are those baseball players up to?
Most teams are not honest, frankly. Well, they just want to be subsidized to play during the year with no intention of winning.
That's right. When anybody goes in for a job interview and they say they want the job interview, well, we know they don't really want the job interview because they don't all get it. In fact, the vast majority of people who go into a job interview don't get the job interview, don't get the job. Therefore, the numbers are, I mean, probably more so than asylum seekers. I don't know if it's 10%, but I mean, you go in for one job. The number of people who we interviewed just for a job at the Majority Report who did not get it suggests that really almost 87% of the people who came in for this job didn't really want it because they didn't get it.
Probably true.
You have to wonder what their motives were then.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
They
A
wanted
lot
to
of
waste
hypocrisy.
Sam time. They wanted to waste Sam's time.
A lot of hypocrisy.
Economic opportunists.
Yeah, let's hear what
economic opportunity. Now, how does that lead into the hypocrisy on the left? Well, the left, I'm not talking about all Democrats. I'm talking about the far left has done nothing over the past 30 or 40 years but bash capitalism as a means for economic prosperity. So you can't have it both ways. Either people in countries that don't practice capitalism are coming here for capitalism's opportunities, or they're not. So when you say to them, well, why are they coming here? Oh, they're coming here from economic opportunity. Why? Because we're the freest country on earth. And why are you bashing our economic system? This is the kind of piece that exposes them if you get them on the record to answer. DeRoy's right. If it's about economic opportunity, Panama is closer and probably has some opportunities there as well. But the left won't admit that. That's why, Steve, they constantly focus on, oh, they're coming here for asylum. Some are. Most of them are not.
Wait, what? I would challenge, I would like to ask every single one of those people on the Fox and Friends couch right now, do you know what he was talking about? And see what they completely pretzel logic.
They don't practice capitalism in Mexico.
Apparently, Mexico's non-capitalist.
What economic system do they have in Honduras?
Freedom.
Michael's our
non-freedom,
resident, internationalist around here.
Honduras practices something that we're super fond of, which is narco-capitalism back by the United States. I don't know what the problem is.
I would say El Salvador is also like that.
Yeah, people in Honduras and El Salvador should
be. But I just want to know, is Dan,
highly free societies.
Is Dan Bongino saying that Panama has more opportunity than America? He doesn't think America's the best?
I think he got confused there because I think what he meant is they couldn't get economic opportunity in Panama, but they can get refuge there if they just want that. I
like to think, I think he got confused there. It could be a summary of Dan Bongino's career.
Dan Bongos.
I'll tell you something. Bongos got confused, brah.
In fact, some of the only people who have not been forced to migrate to cities and sometimes the U.S. are the ones living in the autonomous Zapatista communities, at least in Mexico. So
very possibly. I mean,
that are not capitalist.
So if I understand what Dan Bongino's point is that we should what is the point? Like, I'm trying to figure out. Like,
the point is they want to come here because capitalism's so awesome.
It's 2 points. One, they're mostly liars,
but they only
and
can
they're
come
not really
here
trying to get asylum, but it's awesome here because we have capitalism.
And the ultra left are a bunch of hypocrites.
Yeah, because on one hand they want them all to come here, but they won't admit
It's a little
the reason
clear.
they want to come here is because of capitalism.
Yeah, Bongino's saying they're not leaving because of like terrible circumstances from where they had to leave. They're leaving because they saw Shark Tank.
Well, I propose a third way, which is we eliminate all regressive policies aimed at immigrants. Eliminate them completely. Then we implement socialism in this country and see, because presumably they'll all get the hell out.
They'll all
let's
head to
run
Panama.
an experiment.
That's how
They'll
we
go
get rid
to
of them.
Panama. They're gone. Let's see how that works out. I will totally take that bet.
Because isn't the key point that they have in the back of their mind that if we do socialism, more of these people are going to come here?
Yeah, because I thought it was that they come here to leech off of our welfare systems.
Weird.
Oh man,
Who's the
bongos
hypocrite
all
now?
over the place.
All over the place. Meanwhile, earlier on Fox and Friends, Stuart Varney showed up.
Yeah, speaking of people who actually can't get the fuck out of my country.
Right. Here's Stuart Varney and talking about the French. And I don't know, I'm not sure what the angle on this is. It's just that, how Europe is. Here is Stuart Varney talking about the riots that have been ongoing in Paris.
26% approval inside France, and this is the worst riot since the 1960s.
Look, what's happening in France and what's happening to Macron is a lesson for the left in America, for Democrats in America, and a lesson for all democracies. Number one, he's putting up taxes on gasoline and diesel fuel. He is defending the welfare, the cradle-to-grave welfare state. They need money. The economy there is slowing down. He needs money. He wants to impose these taxes. The people riot. Lesson to the American left. Watch out. You can't fund all these social programs by endlessly raising taxes. Number two, he's part of the Paris Climate Accord. He's got to defend his position on climate. So he raises taxes on gas, so you use less gas, so you conform to the Paris Climate Accord. Lesson to the left in America. You keep raising taxes like this for global warming, and you're going to have a problem on your hands.
Yeah, no
Number
kidding.
three, hold on, there's another one here. This movement, Gilets jaunes is it's called, Yellow Jackets. It started about 6 weeks ago, so it seemed to come out of nowhere. In fact, it came out of social networks in rural France. The rapid organization, rapid development of these protests. There's the lesson. Social networks play a very important role in modern politics.
Indeed.
And it's a way of getting movements going really, really fast.
Wow. That last one was really insightful.
That I almost felt like I was in 1998. I
Right.
was at a Clay Shirky seminar or something. It's brilliant, very timely.
You-
Social networks mobilize protests. Welcome to
hopefully
the
Stuart
latter part of the 20th
Varney doesn't
century.
hear about what happened in Egypt. That's going to blow his mind. Anyways, but with that said, Macron is in trouble for raising taxes and did so by basically looking for funding at in the wrong source. Let the wealthiest go out and protest because their taxes are raised.
That's right. I mean, you need to soak the rich, period, for climate proposals, and he's already been hacking at the welfare state, raising tuitions, and really hurting people. The third thing I would say, though, for the left, and Mélenchon's been kind of interesting with this because he's sort of embraced the protests. He's intimated that they should be a reason to call another election. But these are... the grievances are right, but this is a very right-wing oriented protest. And people need to be a lot more like savvy than just like, oh, it's a protest. That's great. Macron is garbage, but this is a rural National Front style protest. And just like in Brazil, what started as a small anti-austerity movement and an advocacy of free public transportation morphed into a far-right street movement, which backed the coup and led to where we are today.
Right.
I mean, I think the lesson for the left is that we need to be as aggressive as the right. Like, we can't let networks of rural conservatives take up all the, the good riot porn that goes on TV. We need to burn some cars too.
There you go.
The French do not put up with anything, though. I gotta say, that's I'm divided on this because it's not really the things that I would like to see being protested, but they really are a good model. Like you try to raise the retirement age 1 year, and it's like riots everywhere.
Yeah,
take note,
like
Americans.
I've seen students,
Well, that's the great thing.
Start
about
charging
them.
$5 a semester for higher education, and people are in the streets.
Well, they take that lineage seriously, but of like the best deal. But I also though think that more broadly, I'm seeing people like libertarians on social media run with this, because what Macron associating harming people with addressing climate is not only the wrong policy, it's also destructive for long-term action. And also for idiots who stand for Macron and will say like he's being brave on climate and disregard the austerity. Just to note, Macron's environment minister, who was by far the most progressive member of his cabinet, quit in August in a live radio interview and essentially said, I can't take lying about this administration's record anymore. They're terrible on these issues, and they're not fulfilling their commitments.
I'm going to quote Orwell again, as I often do, from The Lion and the Unicorn. He's talking about how you deal with sort of austerity in a wartime situation, but he says it cannot but lower the general standard of living, because the essential act of war, and I think war is a climate change sort of replacement here, is to manufacture armaments instead of consumable goods. The working class will have to suffer terrible things, and they will suffer almost indefinitely, provided that they know what they are fighting for. They are not cowards. They are not even internationally minded. They can stand all the Spanish workers stood and more, but they will want some kind of proof of a better life is ahead for themselves and their children. The one sure earnest of that is that when they are taxed and overworked, they shall see that the rich are being hit even harder, and if the rich squeal audibly, so much the better.
ContraPoints just released a good video on climate change on this topic. And it's very dangerous to portray this as something that is either caused or can be solved by individual consumer choices, when about 70% of the pollution in the atmosphere comes from a small handful of giant corporations.
Meanwhile, this is pretty stunning. What's his face? Seth Moulton was on a. This guy, sometimes you screw up and you really try and start to backpedal. And this, I think, happens a lot. If you mess up in politics, one of the tacks that you can take is you go home and you lick your wounds. The other tack you can take is you try and attack someone who has less power than the person that you just failed to attack. And you just sort of move down in your mind, the pecking order as to who might be vulnerable, right? I tried to go after this person, I got faced, and so now I'm going to go after someone else I perceive as vulnerable. Of all the people, I want you to think of all the people who defended Nancy Pelosi from the insurgency to keep her from being Speaker of the House. There was 15 people who, as you know, signed a letter to defeat her. There was also the no labels people who were trying to leverage her, but everybody else who was defending her. Think of all the people, right? Like the David Axelrods, like the Clintons, like the centrists, and people on the left to a certain extent because of where the politics of Seth Moulton. I want you to think of all those people. If you're Seth Moulton and you want to come out and attack one subset of those people who defended Pelosi, who would you choose? Who would be the most obvious person you attack? Well, of course, it's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, obviously.
From Massachusetts. Speaking of new generation of leadership and speaking of women, you, as you know, even at your town hall meeting, you've been accused of being a sexist. The highest profile person of the new generation of leadership, Ocasio-Cortez, tweets, all the challenges to Leader Pelosi are coming from her right, and an apparent effort to make the party even more conservative and bent toward corporate interests. Are you worried about the impact of this challenge, both on your constituents and on you, Seth Moulton?
No, I'm not, because I believe I'm doing the right thing for the party and the country, and I'm always going to do that. And people who know me know that about me. You know, they may not even always agree with my perspective on things, but they should know that I will always fight for what's right, and I'm not going to just bend with the political winds. I mean, again, this is a position I've had for 2 years. So just because there are some people on the far left complaining about it right now doesn't mean that I'm suddenly going to change my position. And frankly, you know, that tweet is, I think, pretty offensive to someone like Linda Sanchez, a congresswoman from California, who's been at the forefront of this effort for a long time. It's offensive because she's in the Progressive Caucus, so she is a very, very progressive member of Congress. She is not to the right of Nancy Pelosi by any means. And it's also offensive because she's a woman.
What?
Exactly.
Bernie Bro AOC at it again.
I just really do not want women in leadership. So I will stay in the House. I will not run for Senate.
The country's not ready, okay?
The country is not ready. Like, I can represent the Bronx and Queens. I cannot go statewide, obviously, woman. Which is why I support Nancy Pelosi. It makes total sense.
Seth Moulton is going to get primaried, and without a doubt. And I'm telling you right now, I am committed to helping raise money for Seth Moulton's primary candidate.
It's so bizarre. I mean, he could have. I mean, look, him saying he's sexist because he wants to challenge Pelosi is ludicrous too.
Of course,
and there's such a way of just being like.
But where did that even come from?
No, I mean that
in that conversation.
AOC didn't mention
no, that's
other
what I'm
than
saying.
ideology.
He went from like a ludicrous accusation against him to all of a sudden like, do you have an issue with women being Speaker of the House, Seth? Because you have weird.
Who is that? Was that Mike Birbiggs?
That's Rob Riggle.
Rob Riggle.
Rob Riggle's a lot cooler.
They do look very, very similar. That's very odd. I would like to run Rob Riggle against Seth Moulton.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I think Riggle's from the Boston area.
Riggle would toast him.
He's a progressive guy, right?
He's a progressive. I don't know what his exact politics are, but he's also a vet, so he'll smoke Moulton.
There you go.
Is Moulton a vet? Is that his deal? Is that like
not as
brand?
good a vet as Riggle is?
Of course.
Let's go to the IM's Vaprison Guard. Virginia Prison Guard. Manafort drinks Pruno from champagne flute and is the gayest shit I've ever seen anyone do in jail ever. PJ from Montreal. Hey guys, over the weekend I watched the latest appearance of Jordan Peterson on Rogan. In French, we have a word that perfectly represents what Peterson does. Intellectual masturbation. Left is best.
Yeah,
Vispa.
That's interesting.
I think I missed out. You mentioned something about debating a libertarian. Could you fill me in, please? Also, can I get an Ask the Moms drop in honor of the arrival of my new T-shirt from Reagan's Redirect podcast? Left is best. When is the libertarian debate? Like the 12th.
Ask the moms.
Wait, you're having a libertarian debate?
Yeah.
I didn't know about this with who.
Yeah, no. The guy, Adam, you know, the Kokesh.
You
didn't hear about that?
No.
Oh, so
Must
when
have
I
been
was out,
announced when I was for Thanksgiving week.
Yeah, when you were
when I was gone.
absent without leave.
Right.
Exactly.
Reclaiming my freedom.
During the Crowley thing, or Crowder, somehow Kokesh got tagged.
I did hear about this.
Somehow Kokesh got tagged in it.
That's happening.
And he IM'd me, or he tweeted at me, said, I understand that you debate libertarians. And I don't have like notifications set up on my phone or anything like that. I do have one notification set up. Like whenever a libertarian answers my challenge and tweets it, like my whole phone shuts down. And the only thing they can see is that I've been tweeted by a libertarian who wants to have a debate. So we set it up. It's happening. Let's see. The Antifada.
My own show is IMing us.
There you go. That's weird.
Up,
Buenas
Sean?
tardes, Subcomandante Seder. Jamie and I were watching Narcos Mexico last night on Netflix. Is this true, Jamie?
True.
Oh, there you go. And the series surprisingly portrayed the explicit role the CIA played in cocaine trafficking amid the atrocity that became known as the Iran-Contra scandal. with Poppy kicking the bucket on Friday and you being an old as F, do you have any thoughts on how implicated Bush might have been illegally funding the Central American death squads in the 1980s? More money shots of that twunk snack, Matt Leck, please. I think he's heavily involved. I mean, I think there's, without a doubt.
Why would you want a CIA guy to take over the executive position of this country at that point?
Of course. I mean, I think, I think he, look, he pardoned all those guys for a reason. And I think it was to protect himself from being implicated. Implicated probably as VP, but certainly in the context of him being CIA. And I think there's more. I think there was more, too. So, yes. Bull Prague. Professional projectionist Weird Mike Cernovich was working with Dershowitz to silence an Epstein accuser and protect a pedophile ring.
What?
More material for that doc. Who's laughing now? Yeah, we got to look into that.
That would be a good name.
So, a Miami Herald, you saw the Miami Herald
Yes, I
article
did.
about Alan Dershowitz. And in 2006, Mike Cernovich wrote a blog post called Dershowitz Envy, in which he said that he found out what Dershowitz asks for speaking engagements and then says, yeah, I wish I was Alan Dershowitz. So.
Oh, that's okay. Because I was just totally apropos of nothing. I was going to say Dershowitz Envy, and I was going to make a pass the bar / pedophile joke, but that's okay.
Secret Identity Politics. F. Bush Sr. for his 1992 family values speech, in which he famously stated that American families should be more like the Waltons and less like the Simpsons, resulting in countless children of conservative parents across the country being unable to watch The Simpsons for unknown reasons. This also caused tremendous confusion when they went to their friends' houses and found out there wasn't really anything wrong with the show at all. Boink, boink. Hey, Sam, you are beautiful. I wish you were gay at the same time on the same comfortable Casper mattress. Pajama boys forever. Thank you. That's very, very sweet. Train boy, how much of Paul Manafort's erratic actions can be blamed on him being terrified of being killed in or out of prison by his former business associates? That's always been my theory. When he decided to cooperate, I was like, I guess he's not afraid. But I'm not convinced that isn't a big part of it.
If you see Eastern promises.
It's like an interesting take on the Mad Men theory, but the is he going to get killed man theory?
The last thing I want is to be caught up in a steam room in Lower Manhattan.
But it's also possible that he has a bunch of money stashed away, too.
It's also possible.
It's calling from a 651 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
My name is the Chris Lopaco. Yes, the Chris Lopaco. And let me say, first off, can I get a hotline bling dance? Did you do that yet, or
It's a good
does
point.
George Bush not get one?
George H.W. Bush died. No hotline bling dance.
I
don't know if it's quite as joyful as Scalia, though.
No, it's not. It's not nearly as. I mean, because when Scalia passed away, it wasn't just a question of like, oh, is this guy a bad guy, or what is my opinion of him? Scalia's death actually helped people. Like George Bush passing away, that doesn't do anything for anybody. It's just, it is what it is. But Scalia's death that doesn't happen that often, Chris. It's one thing to say, oh, this guy, I don't particularly appreciate him, or he was bad for humanity, or he killed a lot of people, and so he passed away. He got what, that was coming from him. George Bush, as far as I can tell, did not, relative to the suffering that he caused, I don't think he seemed to have suffered at all. I think maybe we saw the worst of it that time he passed out and vomited. But when Scalia died, it actively helped people. I mean, just imagine your own death makes life better, materially better for people.
Well, my sons can finally individuate now.
Yeah,
that's something.
There you go.
Well, I bet the nurse he was copying feels on is doing a hotline bling dance right now.
Gracie is doing the hotline bling because I'm not doing the old corpse David Copperfield trick.
Pop, pop, pop. I know you don't pay attention to these kinds of things, Sam, but I want to just bring up and congratulate you. You passed Jimmy Dore in subscriptions on YouTube. Okay, and I just want to say,
really,
yeah.
Well, hold on for
yeah,
one
very
second.
nice.
That is new and interesting news.
Had no idea.
Who's laughing now, Sam?
Had no idea. Had no idea.
Yeah. Who's a failed comedian now, Sam?
That's
Who's
right.
a failed comedian now, Sam?
That's right.
All right, that's all. I love you. Have a good day. Congratulations.
The Chris Lepaco. Thank you. Well, we will.
Oh, one more thing.
Yeah.
Willie Horton. George Bush did Willie Horton. Okay?
Oh, we said Willie Horton.
Yeah, just don't forget that.
All right.
Okay,
Appreciate the call.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Fuck Jimmy Dore. Bye.
Get those white guys. Get
and
'em.
also,
Get them.
he appointed Souter, but that was just a function of sort of some of the New Hampshire folks in his White House. Clarence Thomas gave us. So, wow, that's interesting information regarding our YouTube channel. Had absolutely no idea. Didn't even realize we kept track of how many subscribers we were. Is that a new thing that you're doing? Matt, are you doing that? Or is that part of YouTube?
No, I guess I'll start paying attention now.
Yeah, you should. All right, let's go to the phones. Calling from a 512 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 512. 512.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Hi. This is Hallie from Texas.
Hello, Hallie from Texas. What's on your mind?
Wow, I'm so surprised I got through. I wanted to talk about liberals taking an anti-war stance in this next election. Is it going to happen? You know, I voted for Obama way back when I was 18 years old. You know, he ran on ending military intervention in the Middle East, and obviously it didn't happen.
Well, wait a second, Hallie.
And,
let me correct you for 1 second.
Yeah.
He ran on ending the war in Iraq. He specifically talked about. I believe he specifically talked about bringing more troops to Afghanistan.
So we need to fight the right war. They're a bunch of Sunni motherfuckers, and we need the Shia to rise.
But you were not alone in projecting some things onto him and his rhetoric.
I was naive. I mean, I was 18. You know, it was a crazy time, and it just. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. I went to some Beto O'Rourke rallies, and he specifically mentioned all 7 countries that we are dropping bombs on right now. And, you know, he didn't take a strong stance on it necessarily. He said, you know, maybe we shouldn't be there. And to me, that was, like, impressive. But I don't know if this is something any other, Democrats are using in their campaign speeches. I just haven't heard it really during this last election.
I mean, I think, look, at this point, the most obvious, to the extent, I don't think that it's possible in this day and age to have an American president who is going to be what you and I would call anti-war. Okay? I think the best that we can do with someone who's going to win is someone who has a sort of a broad sense that America should not be intervening but for an extremely narrow set of circumstances, and who has expressed enough, who understands the connection between domestic politics and foreign policy, and the forces in domestic politics that drive very often our foreign policy. That tends to be money and concentrations of wealth and people who are looking to get resources. So really, I mean, at this point, we don't know who's going to run. But like someone like Bernie Sanders, obviously, I think his policies would be, instead of saying anti-war, the least warful.
He also, I would say, in addition to that, this launch of this Progressive International, which happened this weekend, points to exactly what you're saying in terms of not only being more anti-war, but Bernie's actually started to structure basically just the global version of his anti-oligarchy politics. And that's synchronizing with Corbyn. It's obviously connected to Brazil. And AMLO, his whole inaugural speech was neoliberalization in Mexico is over, which is structural violence. We'll see what happens. So if you want to, I mean, I'm not saying that Bernie's where you might want him to be, but he is head, shoulders, leagues every way above any other potential candidate.
Even Warren,
he's the only one.
He's by far the only one. Warren's not. No one else is there.
Warren has a sort of different structural sense of foreign policy.
Bernie was the only one who will criticize Israel. He's ahead of the curve on Yemen. He's connected with the Latin American movements. There's just no comparison.
Yeah. But I think like Chris Murphy could be better than most.
He's the second.
But
he has a human rights. He doesn't have, which is really important, but he doesn't have the economic connections and seeing actual patterns, which Bernie has.
It's not as tied into domestic, like a structural critique that is similar to the domestic politics. But we could have more. We could see more of it. So
I see it as a moral issue at this point, and now we're gaining moral clarity. And
you also have to realize that it's not, you're not going to be satisfied until you're at the very least until you're my age. You're not going to be satisfied. Probably even then, you're going to still be unsatisfied. But the trajectory can head in the right direction. And I think like the idea that we have a candidate who is, if you just look at the numbers, I mean, I don't know if he's going to even run, but would be considered a presumptive favorite, maybe not but a presumptive favorite who is getting on the stage and is going to be articulating this. I can tell you that is a huge leap forward as to where we are in our politics. So
he was moving in the right direction.
Keep hope
2016,
alive.
But I mean, that was like a little bit of like, hey, I actually am not friends with Henry Kissinger because he's a war criminal. Maybe we should.
Well, that was all. He hadn't developed something
but that's
yet.
what I'm saying is that it's gotten so much more. I mean, starting in the summer of 2017 with the Iran and Saudi Arabia stuff through Latin America. I mean, he's in a completely different place, and it's very good.
You're going to talk about opposition to war from a moral perspective, which I think is really important. But it's also important to make the economic connections, like you were just talking about, Michael, because throughout history, war has been used by the international ruling class to divide the workers of the world from one another, keep them from working together, and keep them oppressed. And I think Bernie understands that.
Yeah, this is going to be a long-term project, because I read Stephen Kinzer's most recent book. We had him on the show for this.
Which one?
The one about sort of Teddy Roosevelt and also like Mark Twain, and like 100 years ago, basically, was the last time that abolishing war was a serious project that like a lot of people thought they could actually accomplish. And then, you had World War I and World War II. But like, if we ever want to get to that conversation again, it's going to need to be like where Chris Murphy's a centrist on this sort
100%.
of thing.
Yeah. Lessons from the German Social Democratic Party: never vote for the war. It does not go well for the left.
Guida Nora. Manafort thinks he's smarter than Mueller. Trump thinks he's smarter than everyone. Those who think they are smarter than everyone usually turn out to be in a room full of mirrors. This guy was pretty good. He's on Fox and Friends. Sheriff Grady Judd. Where does old Sheriff Grady Judd come from? Do we know? From Florida, right? And look, ladies and gentlemen, you're not going to believe this. Down in Florida, a 12-year-old brought pot gummies to gym class. Now, listen, that is a sign of a bad parent, but I can tell you.
That's a sign of a cool kid who knows how to relax his muscles after a hard workout.
I can tell you that in my daughter's middle school, which is attached to a high school, somebody brought in one of those pre-mixed like rum drinks or something. So
another cool kid.
Yes,
very high school.
And
Awesome.
in other high schools, you can find people who bring in Juuls, those vaping cigarettes.
Yeah, those are cool with teens for some reason.
Those are slightly less
because they're all
cool
flavored
than the rum and
because they're all flavored.
I think they banned the flavors for that reason, right?
Well, they're going to, I think, or they.
There's going to be a lot of knockoffs.
Stock up on your cotton candy Juuls, everybody.
There you go. And also, there are kids who bring in weapons into school, and also
most cool kids.
Racist material. I mean, everything under the sun can be brought in there. And but here's Sheriff Grady Judd to tell us how we're going to take care of this.
No one talks about this. THC is addicting. People I know so many people, they say they were told one thing and they end up getting addicted to it. And that's an addicting substance. There is a price to pay for pot.
There absolutely is a price to pay for pot. You know, I spent my entire adult life in law enforcement, and a lot of it investigating traffickers of drugs. And it's not
Pause
a
it.
minor...
Now, this premise can cut a couple of different ways. I've dedicated my whole life to a project that seems to have actually been for absolutely no reason whatsoever.
Maybe caused harm.
In fact, on top of it, actually probably been extremely detrimental to the health of society. So I am not backing down off of this. I'm going to deny, and continue to exclaim in such a way that makes me feel like my life's work has meant something. Otherwise, what am I going to do? That's not what's you're about to hear. But just go back and we'll listen to this.
In law enforcement, and a lot of it investigating traffickers of drugs. And it's not a minor nonviolent felony. It's ruining families and killing people every day across the United States. And we stand here in denial, thinking that it's not a gateway drug to drugs that's killing
you don't start
people.
on cocaine. You probably start with marijuana, and it leads to other things, right?
That's absolutely right. And still today, we have a meth problem across this state and country. If someone's in possession of meth, they're in possession of marijuana because it kind of cuts the edge of the meth. And then they use the marijuana and the meth and they go out and kill themselves or overdose or kill someone else.
Right. Well, nonetheless, these particular gummies and the edibles are legal in other states, but, obviously in the state of Florida, it is not.
There you go.
I think I saw a documentary on what he was talking about. I think it's called Reefer Madness.
Yeah, exactly.
I love to smoke some meth, and then follow that with a little bit of weed, and then go out and kill people.
Yeah, what I do is first the meth gets you really aggressive high, then you tone it down a little bit so you can focus with the weed
on the death,
and either
what's the word
myself or others.
What is the word on that huge uptick in Colorado now that we have data over the past couple of years on the enormous surge in meth murders? Do we have that?
I'll look up.
The marijuana cartel is keeping those.
Yeah, it's being
suppressed. Suppressed information.
I mean, this is where it's just like they might as well just also put under the crawl, like everyone who watches Fox News is over the age of 65. That's
Baby
pretty
boomers
impressive.
should know about pot.
I mean, imagine the effect it would have on you as a human being, though. If you spent like 20 years just locking people up for this shit, and then you realize, like, turns out that actually this was the wrong thing to be doing.
That is the funny reveal of that clip, though, is it's like, yes, marijuana has ruined plenty of people's lives.
Because of the law.
If you're poor and you get caught by this idiot, it could ruin your life.
I mean, think of
quite literally.
Even also, just be clear that Grady Judd is the host of the Polk County Sheriff podcast entitled "Not in My County."
No.
Oh my
and
God.
so if you,
I know what I'm listening
So
to.
we gotta play some. We gotta get some clips of that for TMBS post game tomorrow night.
Not in Polk County, not in my county, with Sheriff Grady Judd. And for instance, this week, let's see, I'll tell you what's on Not in My County. Sheriff Grady Judd speaks with the greatest investigative mind in the United States, W.J. Martin. America's sheriff answers your questions and tells the tales of a woman shoplifting Paula Grip and glasses.
Oh, what a
now,
bitch.
remember, it's brought to you by Bartow Ford and Payne Air Conditioning and Hearing.
Hell yeah.
Oh, yeah. There we go.
Brought to you by narcs who don't want you to have fun.
I mean, you think about how many families have been sort of like have struggled with like, hey, the parent is very afraid of a kid doing drugs, not because of the drug, but because of the effect of the, the
criminal justice,
criminal justice system on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the prospect of being murdered by the police,
like alienating parents from kids for like, and that's the lightest, problem.
Oh yeah, that's the most gentle problem.
Grady Judd.
So yeah, marijuana can definitely get you in trouble because of Grady Judd and Grady Judd-like things.
Just don't mix it with meth.
Oh, if you mix it with meth, you're going to kill people.
Yeah.
We'll play the
I will go
No
out
Label song tomorrow. And,
I will be stuffy for a second and go, meth is probably not healthy for you. Though it should not be criminal.
Gives you a
All right. I get time for one more phone call. I'm sorry. We've got people hanging on for... Oh, wow. All right. So we'll just... last phone caller. I'm sorry, folks. Calling from a 256 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sam?
Yeah.
Sam?
Yes. This is Sam. Who is this?
All right. My name is Jonathan from Alabama.
Jonathan from Alabama.
And I was wondering if you might be able to change my mind about something.
Sure.
Well, I have yet to be fully convinced about the effectiveness in the political discourse about public debates. And I know that you hold a lot of public debates. And I was just wondering if you happen to have any opinions on that, because frankly, it doesn't really seem to me like it's really going to do any good when it comes to a political discussion.
I think the value is limited. Without a doubt is limited. All right. And really on some level it is, I mean, look, I think the value from my perspective, well, let me just tell you in terms of my participation in these things. Okay. I don't know how to necessarily make a broad assessment, but the reason why I started having libertarians on to debate them was because the libertarian movement was sort of like becoming a little bit more fashionable after the Bush years, because there were conservatives who didn't want to associate themselves with it. It's not happening during the Trump years. I'm not exactly sure why, because I think maybe just the Republican Party has just been overwhelmed. But the idea was basically to give people who listen to this show, it was a way of providing them more information about ideology that they do believe in, and more information on how to, in the course of having conversations with friends at work or acquaintances, how to rhetorically talk about politics. And so in that sense, I think there's value in it. I don't think it converts anybody's mind. I don't think any of these libertarians who came on decided that they're going to be, not subscribe to that ideology. But I do think that there are people who, and we've had libertarians who've called into the show and say, I watched a bunch of your debates, and I'm actually I don't subscribe to libertarianism anymore. I think that happens, but I think that's not the primary reason to do it. The primary reason is to give people in this audience sort of a deeper understanding of left values and how rhetorically to address some of the right's claims. When I do something like I go and debate Charlie Kirk in public like that, for me, the idea is that like he's got a huge budget. I mean, he has, I think the annual operating budget of his, advocacy group is something like $4 or $5 million. And so his message is getting out there. And the only thing that occurs to me that can puncture that is if somebody's online, and I'm talking by somebody, I mean usually young people, and they Google Charlie Kirk, I just want that debate to come up in their stream and hopefully, poke holes in his ideology for them so that they, their doubt starts to creep in. So I think on balance, that's why I do it. And believe me, the idea of going to Politicon, I'm not enthralled at the idea. I really I find it, it's like, I think it contributes to making politics like a game and like a sport. And I think that's really problematic. I think YouTube does that too. But you know what? It's like, I don't have the ability to reform the game, the system as it was. I don't have the ability to do that. So I have a choice. I can either not participate, which does nothing and seeds the ground for these people, or I can participate and try and beat them in the context of that system. I mean, this is the dilemma. Honestly, it's a dilemma. I mean, I concede that there may be a better answer. I don't know what it is. And I feel like I can maybe keep myself from getting sullied in some way, but that doesn't really help with my project. That just makes me feel better about myself. And, I don't think that helps with my project.
All right. That does make a lot of sense. I do fully agree with that when it comes to the situation of, your debate or someone with a good debate over a particular person you were talking about. If that happens to pull up in the YouTube recommendations, that does make a lot of sense.
Yeah. I mean, that's the best I got for you. I am, but you don't need to sell me on the skepticism, because I'm definitely skeptical. I can assure you that. Appreciate the call, Jonathan.
Oh yeah.
Thanks, man.
All right. Thanks.
Bye. All right. That is the final call for the day. We'll take a couple IMs. We'll get going. JJ Cool. It's hard to argue that every Bush, okay. Irrational International. Was it Oliver North that Bush Sr. reinstated his full rank and benefits as an officer? I think that's possible. Congressional baseball fan. I'd like to apologize to Gavin McGinnis for the baseball bat comment he received that forced him to resign as leader and founder of his club. Instead, I simply want to ask if he would like to go out on the ball field and practice playing catch. Sean MD. Haven't heard from Doug in a while. Did he drown in the blue wave? Classless. Yeah, didn't he say, wait a second. Didn't Doug promise me the Democrats were going to lose seats?
That sounds familiar, yeah.
Right, in everywhere that Doug lives, without a doubt, his congressman is now or congressperson is now a Democrat. That's funny.
I don't remember that guy.
Doug?
Obscurity.
Classless Creative. I'm not sure if you've covered this, but it's worth noticing going forward that Tribune has made a deal to a $4 billion deal to Nexstar. I work for Tribune. By reputation, the term Death Star is being thrown around. It's maybe better than Sinclair, but it's still not fun. I'll look into it. Basement Dweller. Sam, how do you address someone that is concerned about Medicare for All proposals and the impacts on various medical professional wages? What are the various options for negotiating compensation for various surgeons, specialists, and professionals in the healthcare industry? Smash the fash. There will be, I would imagine, there certainly needs to be, a reduction in the wages that some of the highest earning doctors are making, without a doubt. The upside is it won't cost you $200,000 to go get a medical degree. Downward pressure will happen on those institutions, and I imagine at one part of it will probably be fully subsidized. But yes, doctors overcharging compensation will drop. Now, their jobs are also going to get significantly better. Because, you ask a doctor the concerns that they have, one of the primary concerns is getting paid because the insurance crap that they have to do, that's no longer going to be part of their practice.
And if you look at who's in favor of single payer health care and who's opposed, there's definitely a class division within the medical profession, right? Because most of the big nurses unions are in favor of single payer, whereas the AMA is still against it. So
the
that should
AMA
tell you something.
They have been
They were
the first PR propaganda campaigns to kill it back in the 30s and 40s come from the AMA.
Yeah.
No sympathy for the AMA.
But, I mean, putting aside the AMA, in terms of doctors, I think most doctors will not be severely impacted. There'll be some who will lose, will not get as compensated, but they also have the option, I guess, theoretically, of doing a concierge for just super wealthy people. A Square, get ready. Wednesday will be a complete revisionist spectacle, not unexpected, Sam, that we would get this convention of neocons paraded over the weekend. More disconcerting to see MSNBC hosts follow suit. Andy Card and others, including Dark Lord Cheney, on the tube. So recasting of Bush was joined by many in the Bush 43 cabal. Ugh, I know, gross. TMBS is my jam. Sam, what is your take on the North Carolina State Board of Elections voting not to certify the 9th? I mentioned this the other day. Something's going on. There was a Democrat who resigned from the board just to make sure that he didn't become a distraction. But something severe happened in a district in North Carolina, 9th District.
Is that the one where it looks like they sent people to go collect absentee ballots and stuff?
Is that what it was? The Republican won by 900 votes. And we'll see about this. It's going to be interesting. Alon Musty. Sometimes I think leftists that are like that low self-esteem person in a bad relationships. We are always eulogizing far-right politicians when they would never do the same for Obama or Bernie. Well, look, I don't think the reason...
How many leftists are doing that?
But I don't think the reason why you should do it or not do it is a function of like that. That's just the wrong thing. It's just like, let's just, even in death, public people should be responsible for what they did and how they interact with the public, period. He could be a very nice guy at home. I don't think he is, but it doesn't matter. Or he could be a tyrant at home. What really matters is what they did in terms of the public. And this is just like, this is sad. Like, we need daddy to be a nice guy, even in death. You know what? Just save it for your own daddy. Save it for your own daddy.
What are you talking? What are you complaining about? Just say thank you, please.
Old devil dies. Old devil dies.
Chris from Taiwan.
That's how I know why Obama gets excommunicated.
All right, let me do these 5. I'm going to get going here. Chris from Taiwan. Tinder is most definitely international. In fact, in my experience, it works way better in East Asia.
Oh, God.
Old school, new rules. Social networks mobilize protests. It's like popular ideas are popular. Crazy stuff. St. Louis socialist. Can we agree that Stuart Varney has a mediocre British accent? Just dog shit. Worst British accent I've ever heard. I think he's Australian. Dan Bangsingo. No, Samantha, I don't really want to go out with you. I practice capitalism. I'll just patronize a trafficked economic opportunist and support growth because I love the freedom and determinism of choice. I'm not a communist. And Bonara. Saddam's main Kuwait issue was their slant drilling under Iraq's border to get at Iraqi oil. My belief, he was an idiot. And when the U.S. signaled its nonchalance about the exact border dispute, the moron thought he could occupy all Kuwait without devastating consequences. Isn't indeed. Rust Belt Progressive. Cenk did a live video over the weekend praising President Bush. Luckily, I knew MR. Oh, God.
Stop instigating drama. Save it for
Sam's
the more
Tinder profile.
Stuff.
Hey,
I better not watch that video or I'll do an impression.
Hey, AOC, swipe right. Help me lower the age of Social Security to 40.
There's another thing that was
the Antifada. Buenos tardes. Oh, yeah, we already read that one. And the final I am of the day. Hi, Sam. My favorite quote from Daddy Bush while referring to the John Birch Society members as the double X chromosome gang. All right, folks. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years while I shifted